to order, and we'll start off with Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is the approval of minutes. I've reviewed them, and I recommend an approval.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. First order of business is an RDA for 104 Colonial Ave.
Anyone be present for someone here for this matter?
I move that we table.
Okay. Next one is 0 Riverview Street, Mass Electric.
Mass Electric. Thank you. This is for the installation of two. This is the plan. They're so small. Utility poles on Riverview Street. You can present.
For the record, I'm Tracy Dewar, Chronicle Engineers. I'm here on behalf of National Grid. They are proposing to install 2 wooden utility poles on the western side of Riverview Street. It's within the 100-foot inner riparian of the, I hate to butcher this name, Cochichilic Brook. Is it close?
Chico.
All right. So that shows up on the North Andover riverfront map. Doesn't show up on USGS. It's also within the 200-foot riverfront of the Merrimack River. So the purpose is to remove some metering equipment, which is inside of the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District building, and move it outside to locate them on those poles. There's already 2 wooden poles on the western side of the street now, so these are going to be located about 20 feet east of them, right on the shoulder of the road. The project itself is exempt from the Wetlands Protection Act, but it's not exempt under the local bylaw, so they're seeking a negative determination.
Jack?
Yes, will the 2 existing poles be removed?
No, those are gonna stay, and then these are gonna go in line with them.
What's the purpose of the new poles then?
I guess it's to move the metering equipment from within the sanitary district building onto those poles.
Onto those poles? Oh.
Why they can't put it on the 2 existing ones, I'm not sure. Alignment, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I have no other questions.
How long is the project a day?
Oh, a day, if that.
Al?
I'm afraid I'm going to ask you questions that you
Same thing.
indicated you might not be able to answer.
Might not be able to know.
I'm more interested in the need for the project. If there are 2 poles there, and the applicant is claiming an exemption, I think that we're entitled to know the need for the project. Why? The why part. You don't seem to know.
No, that's just what I was told, is that they were told they need to move this equipment out of that building.
Equipment.
Metering equipment, which can be located on a pole.
So then what are the 2 additional poles going to do?
They're going to house that equipment on them.
The poles are transmission lines? Do I understand that right?
It's on a distribution line, yeah.
Because in the project description, I'm looking, project description, the project description talks about the exemption and under 310 CMR, which is for the installation of directly embedded units in 10 feet of range from the user. Yes. I guess I'll keep looking and see if I can figure it out. If you want to go past me and come back, I'll do some reading.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the poles, as long as they're working within the roadway, or doing the work from the roadway, extending over.
From the roadway.
From the roadway, reaching over with minimal changing, grading, or clearing of vegetation.
Yeah, there won't be any.
That's what gives it the exemption under the act. And they're not claiming exemption under the bylaw. That's why they're here before us looking for the RDA. And really, basically, ultimately a waiver under our local bylaw. That's what they're actually asking for, right?
No, they're just asking a permit at negative number 3 with, they're showing erosion controls, and we could do a pre and post, but
And these are just augured in poles. I mean, like you said, one
It's
day.
directly in bed,
Really,
yeah. They're just gonna
couple
auger it
hours to set
down.
the poles, and the rest of it's probably more than a couple days of equipment transfer, but even still, that's, the work is the poles.
Yes.
So I don't think there's any particular issue with the work itself. The only, caution that we would want, and as anybody would want, would be that, coordination with any buried utilities. If there's a drain line or something that might venture its way down to the river from there, we just gotta be careful to protect that. So marking out of utilities ahead of time. The misnomer is oftentimes that the utility companies, themselves are subscribers to DigSafe and members of DigSafe, but the town itself is not. So just because they notified DigSafe doesn't necessarily that the town get notice to go out and mark the utility. So obviously, we don't want to pull damaging an underground drain line. I think it's the limit of our jurisdiction is that type of concern.
Well, they're in the GLSD right away.
No, they're in the roadway right away, right?
They're in GLSD's easement. GLSD has an easement there. For some reason, National Grid is also seeking an easement, but I got that language late today, so we don't have it. If they want a second easement there, we can work that out, but the GLSD has an easement. I pulled all the easement documents. I have them here if anybody wants to see them, but they clearly have an easement, recorded, everything.
Yeah. So that's it. The only question, we bought enough time for Al to come up with some questions.
Yeah, and the equipment that you're gonna put on these new poles, where is it currently located?
Somewhere within the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District building.
So that building's not shown on the plan.
I think it is. Isn't the pump house building that's right there?
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking at, if you look at the aerial
No, this
photography.
plan here.
There isn't any work in between, though.
No.
No work
Yeah.
in between is proposed.
Right, just overhead wiring.
What about putting the equipment on the existing poles over there?
I'm not sure why National Grid doesn't feel they can do it. It might be an alignment thing. But they feel the need that they need these 2 new poles in addition.
That's all the questions I have.
Al?
No, the only question I have, and the form is silent on what the purpose of the poles is, what's going to be on them. Are they going to, do you have cables running? Are you running new cables from somewhere? Is there a new feed going in? It just doesn't tell us. I understand it's only 2 poles. I understand they're only augering them in. I get it, but there's always in every application in the narrative.
Yeah, there's no new overhead wire proposed. There's already one going for the western side easterly, and it's just going right along that alignment.
So
Whatever equipment they have to add is just getting attached to the poles.
yeah, they put you in a bad spot. You're here to talk about the wetland science, which is what we do. We just always like to know why we're permitting an activity. So the information lacking, I have no more questions.
Any more questions? Motion?
I believe it's just a negative number 3 with bylaw only with pre and post construction inspection.
So moved.
Second. Before we take this vote,
Discussion.
yeah, I know you're concerned about pulling the power line, but can we condition that?
No, not as an IDA, and not as a -3. You can't condition anything.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can condition an RDA.
According
Yeah.
according to all the conferences we
No,
attend.
And it doesn't, they don't limit it to 3. They just, if there are too
It's a
many
guidance.
conditions, it should
It's a
be
guidance.
an NOI, but there is no limit to the conditions. There's a space to put conditions. I tend to put them on a separate page. You can put them right on the form. There is a spot. But
Yeah.
this is only requiring pre and post, because the only work they're doing is the poles in the ground.
Just vote it. It doesn't- it's-
Okay.
Just vote it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next.
I'm opposed. It's not
One
unanimous.
And
opposition.
opposed.
One opposition.
But I knew you were going to get it anyway, so
Yeah.
I can make a symbolic no vote and feel good about myself.
Didn't make me feel any worse. Thank you.
I just couldn't, I can't vote yes for it as much as I would have liked.
Thank you.
Next one is, that's that chicken wall,
Hold on, I got the one for Colonial.
Yeah, the DOT car out there.
That's for Jen's file.
Central John.
Yep. Here are the photos for... That's one set up, there's another. So would you like that, oh, do you have your green card? Oh, you didn't notify abutters. So they're filing only under the Wetlands Protection
Oh,
Act,
I love this one.
citing their exemption from the local bylaw. I provided you the two sides of that discussion in your packets. We've had it with them before. And let me get the plan up here.
I'm sorry, say what you just said again. They're claiming exemption under the local bylaw?
Correct, but last time we gave, there was the Boxford decision that says, and I cite all the language, excuse me, from that Boxford decision in an email to them, and they sent a letter back. So,
So we actually held it on 125 at the Andover line on the bypass piece, and we held it with other state agencies, Harold Parker and whatnot. They've done work.
GLSD, yeah.
And GLSD, and
right.
each time been pretty
That we
firm
can't
it's not exempt.
prevent, the local bylaw cannot prevent them from doing work, but you don't know that the local bylaw is going to prevent them from doing work until they actually file. So as long as the conditions upon them are reasonable, then they can be subject to local regulation, was the Boxford decision.
Right.
And I cited that
Right,
language
right,
in the email
and I
that you
remember
had.
that, sure.
So,
So I just want to make sure, coming out of the gate, do we have a incomplete filing, or do we have a partial filing? We're going to only hear the state portion?
well, I don't think we've ever subjected the state to fees, per se, just like we don't subject the town, the municipality, but the municipality does notify abutters, as does everyone else, and what else would be included in that? You did the legal ad, so the legal ad's still a part of it. And then just, the way they consider their project doesn't take into consideration the local performance standards.
So my question ultimately becomes, do we have the basis to open this hearing and begin the discussion, or do we have an incomplete application filing, therefore we probably ought not start it? That's my question.
I'm not the legal representative here, so.
You are.
Another question, are these plans complete? Are you looking for permission to start construction?
No.
No.
We're in the preliminary design phase, which
Okay.
is more or less what the footprint is going to be for the project.
So what's the purpose of coming to us now?
Can you identify yourselves too?
Sure.
Yeah.
Kristen and, I'm sorry.
Brian Cadero, Mass DOT Environmental.
And Kristen Hayden with CLD Construction, or Consulting Engineers.
Yeah, there's not going to be any major changes to this project design moving forward. We've done the majority of the work now, and once we get to the final plan specs and estimates, there shouldn't be anything different that would change the permitting or its determination of applicability to the act.
We have a preliminary design completed, and we're going to a public hearing next, and prior to presenting this product to the public, we basically want to make sure that you're amenable to using this area that is in question for detention before we show it to the public, because once you take that step, it's really hard with the right-of-way process to go backwards. It's kind of, and we need the product to keep moving forward, so before we take the product any further, we wanted to meet with you and be upfront and say, this is the area we're thinking of using for detention, and we want to make sure that you're potentially amenable to
the idea, and if you are, then we will submit final plans at a later date with all the final detailing, with erosion control and all the different aspects that would be included with this.
But the reason we're filing now is because we're confident that there aren't going to be any changes.
There won't be any major changes. This is the design, but you will see something like erosion control items around the exterior of the slope limits.
And I will add to the question on notifying abutters and applicability to local bylaw. It's kind of like a solid community thing going on here, where, you know, we are responsible for the best public interest for the entire state. So it'd be kind of duplicative. Well, I want to say redundant, I guess, to go ahead and notify abutters where we already go through the right-of-way process following the completion of NEPA. Once we get the CE done, then we'll start the right-of-way process where we notify anybody where we have easements and we go through that
So without getting
avenue.
too into the project itself, depending on what program you're doing this project under, there is also an opportunity for 25% design hearing and 75% hearings with the public hearings with the public. Is it that type of project, or is it not?
Absolutely, every project we will have a design public hearing for. And that's before we get into really finalizing things and making sure that everybody's aware of what's going on.
So just as that's a design public hearing, all you're really talking about is what it is you're proposing to do in a large envelope, mostly transportation related, and the folks who are going to be coming to that meeting won't be thinking much about the wetland issues. And what is coming to mind, this is Mass Ave,
Mass Ave 125.
and 125, so if you, just opposite the 99 restaurant,
Yes.
that's not an endorsement, that's just a location. Right across the street from that is an apartment building, and we've put them through a pretty arduous hydraulic study about 10 to 15 years ago. Much of the water originating from this intersection, and anything that changes here affects that study, and there were, as I recall, large interest at the public hearings with regards to moving of water through this intersection, not to that property. So the folks who'd be coming to a hearing at this table are very much interested in drainage as a very different element than they might be coming out to a transportation project at 25% hearing. So I think, however it is we get the word out and notify folks that there's something proposed here, they may want to come out and be heard. We need to do that. That's what we do. If it's a private applicant, there's no question, and the state has not battled or disagreed on other parts of projects, and I'm remembering 125 by Merrimack heading out towards the end of a line where there were in fact some neighbors with concerns, and had we not had a hearing, we wouldn't have been able to address those concerns.
Well, the other way to go about that would be to give this a positive and have them file an NOI, in which case...
I wasn't going to go there. He said it really leaves you like only 3 options.
I was going there.
Just it's going to be a positive, and then you come.
If you read the work description, their own work description on their letterhead, there isn't any question that it's an NOI, just by their own work description alone. If you look at the description of work and what they're doing, they're talking about retaining walls to minimize disturbance to the abutting property, and they're talking about realignment of lanes. There's going to be water going all over the place, and you're exactly right on point. The abutters are going to be in here screaming, looking for somebody's head. I'd rather see it on an NOI.
Well, it's not an issue of notifying abutters, and I will say we're just in buffer zone, so
Yeah,
that's why we filed an RDA.
That's your position. We have every right in the world to vote positive and require you to come back with an NOI.
And what we do is we just say that we're doing temporary impacts to the area that you call a wetland resource area. And we just have another hearing.
Well, then let's not chat anymore. I'll make the motion right now. I move that we find this a positive.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
On discussion.
On discussion.
I mean, I'm aligning myself with where this might be going, but I don't.
Why is an NOI punitive? I mean, it's going to give more information and more
Well,
study.
again, the question that's here is, we're only going to be acting on the Wetlands Protection Act and not the bylaw. They haven't requested anything. So are we also, by being silent, we're not relinquishing any authority under our bylaw either? we're only issuing a positive under the Wetland Protection Act. Is that correct? Because that seems like what we're about to do. And the issue of any other things that are required under our local bylaw that we want to concern ourselves with will still be a battle on that future date whenever they come back. And I just want to be clear that that's where we're coming from.
We're talking about a lot of work that's gonna move some water around. And we're talking about the potential for flooding. And they addressed that they might have to mitigate existing flooding issues during the process.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
the proposal is.
That's what the proposal
is. To add stormwater management to the intersection.
So that's an NOI. That's an NOI. Why is that so painful? That's the way the deal works here. That way we can have the best management practices laid out, and there's control, and there's some study, there's some oversight. Why is that punitive? We make people file NOIs for substantially less work.
There is quite a bit of work, and like you say, like Joe said, that wetlands replication area, there's a stone wall there I saw on the plans today, right where the Heritage Green.
If you remember the study that was done, the problem went all the way down to the Shawshing River by Demoulas, came up across Waverly, up through, was it not Wood Lane, what's the housing development in there? Woodridge, up through Woodridge, up through the back of Village Green, all the way across the yards here, right to this intersection. And boy, oh boy, if my recollection, I think we had 20 people at some of those hearings concerned about that. And to now allow more pavement and just a shrug of the shoulders saying, yeah, I guess your detention's sufficient, I think.
Yeah, I mean, all public concerns will be addressed at the design public hearing. So I don't think that we need to continue it based on that at this hearing, because everyone's comments will be addressed at that point. I think if we keep it within the confines of looking at wetland resource areas within the area and what we're doing, and Kristen could take the floor here and talk about what we're doing to mitigate for existing flooding impacts, and it is going to be an improvement upon existing conditions once you hear her out, and that is really not going to change if we
So Al's,
get
this is Mr. Manzi, Al, that I'm referring to. Al is leading towards is that's all well and good, and that's all what is proper fodder for a public hearing, and that's when all those things get addressed. There's no big forum under an RDA to go into that kind of detail about a review of drainage, or even if we decide to send it out for a third-party review. We don't get a chance to do that from this table tonight.
Technically, under a request for determination, you could provide all the information you would under a notice of intent. You completely satisfy the commission, and they could issue a negative determination because they've got all the information. You haven't presented all the information yet. You've only got preliminary drawings.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still information that would be submitted, so.
So if
So
go
the
ahead.
motion on the floor is an appropriate motion for us to consider. Because, if you were to, in other words, if we issue a positive motion, that means you're going to file a notice of intent. Whether it's under the Wetlands Act only or under the bylaw as well.
Yeah.
Is another discussion. But the thing is, you'd have to file a notice of intent, and we would expect to have all the information that you have. If you want to have a hearing on your own with the neighbors as to what you're doing here, then that's fine, but we also want those same people to come to a conservation commission and express their concerns to the commission they may have relative to wetlands issues or drainage issues. Because it's as important to us as it is to you. Now, we don't want these meetings separated, where the meetings you hold, you may control in some way, and we want it open, to have an honest discussion with the people.
Absolutely, and those are the drainage issues with this project will be presented at that public hearing, for sure, especially if it is of special public interest.
I've conducted several of those public hearings, because I'm a public works director. And I've done a lot of work with MassDOT, and that is almost always a transportation project presentation, and very little, unless there's a specific outcry from citizens raised at a meeting that might get continued to a second session, isn't addressed right out front. So yeah, I beg to differ. unless you are pledging to roll it out, we have no assurance that that's going to happen. So I just want to be crystal clear, not from based on my experience on several dozens of projects with public hearings required on the DOT. So I respectfully disagree. Now, I was about to go with 3 options. One was to do where Al is going, is it's positive and when you go through the hoops. 2 is approve it, and I don't think that's likely. You can prove it as a negative. And third is to continue this request for a public for a determination, submit the documentation, notify the abutters, and bring them out and have that hearing properly under the guise of an RDA and review it on its merits and then make a decision based on the input we gather. So that's kind of a middle of the road. Those are really our only 3 options available to us.
So, yeah, here are my questions. So the positive determination would be based on what?
Are you doing work within the jurisdiction of the Protection Act that's not exempt, and therefore it's positive and it applies?
And that's the buffer zone, and not the fact that any the drainage ditch is considered jurisdictional.
I don't think they're calling the drainage, no one's discussed the drainage.
Right, I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, so, but you're right up to the edge of that intermittent stream, which
is jurisdictional.
Which is jurisdictional. And technically, you know, there is BVW. The swale has been unmaintained, so in that regard, there's BVW associated with it now. But it was clearly constructed as a drainage ditch. And there are a lot of concerns with water down the end of Autran Ave. We've had a DPW project down there as well. And I didn't even consider when I was reviewing this that, you know, you've designed something that we don't know hydrologically if it, you know, treats the stormwater effectively, if it captures, you know, controls the rate and quantity. None of that information has been presented to us.
So this is a pretty hard project to approve as an RDA. There's a lot of, I have concerns across the street too, at that small area, because there's a pipe and a head wall that goes into by Atkinson School, and it's quite a lot. So it's not just that area by Heritage, there's an area across the street that could be impacted
The
too.
pipe that goes into the Atkinson School, there is minimal flow increase in that area because that's not where the majority of the intersection does drain to. The majority of the intersection does drain to the.
Right now.
And in the future it won't. We're not proposing to change the drainage dramatically from the existing because.
Like Mr. Nancy said, we don't have the material information to agree or disagree, to approve it on an RDA.
Can you make it a condition of some sort to state that you need to have the specifics of a drainage report of some sort of showing that we are detaining what we are decreasing the stormwater off of the site into the area?
To be honest with you, that's what you should have, that's the information that should be in front of us right now. You're kind of swinging, you're coming in here operating by the seat of your pants, I'm sorry, but that's what you're doing. You're looking for an IDA, you're looking for a negative IDA, and you're offering us virtually nothing in the way of evidence.
Okay.
And at the very minimum, if you want to continue to pursue the negative, and that's your right to do that, you ought to be in here with your information. And just coming in and giving us a 2-page description with you guys sitting there, I appreciate your attendance, but there's not enough data here. There's not enough information for us to do anything.
What you ought to consider doing is, if you want to continue with a request for determination, you would continue this hearing and gather additional information. Provide the information you would submit if you were submitting a notice of intent to the commission. All that information, the drainage reports, the studies, you know, I mean, if you're suggesting that you're going to have less runoff from this area after construction than currently exists, that may be a positive thing to some of the issues that have been raised. But we need the information that definitely shows that that's the case. Not, you know, I don't just take your word for it. I'm sure that what you're saying is what you're going to do. But the thing is, you need to demonstrate that to us with the stormwater report and the design analysis that shows that this is what's happening. And they say as if this were a notice of intent, you provide that same information. That makes treating it as a request for determination somewhat easier on the commission, especially a project of this size and scope, in a sense, that it's not a simple project.
It's definitely not a simple project.
So, it's more to it. So the easy thing to do for us is to say, file a notice of intent, but you're going to have to provide all that information. So I think one of the options that's been given to you is to either say, yeah, okay, I'll file a notice of intent, or you continue and then you file additional information, say we'll continue as a request for determination, but here's all that other information that you've asked for. That demonstrates that what we're doing has a positive effect on drainage from this site.
So that speaks to the receipt of information, the review of that information by us, but there's still some question with regards to what sort of notification went out to the public for this meeting tonight.
Just a legal ad.
Just the ad in the paper, no
One of the
notification to
So
abutters.
I would suggest that, I'm not suggesting, I'm maintaining that, whether they agree with the bylaw or not, in order for our process to be proper and complete, they need to be notified, the abutters, that we're about to review this information.
I think at a minimum. And that's part of the NOI process. If you want to do that as part of your request for an IDA, that's fine, you can do that, but we want a butter notification. And
Right. I mean, I don't think we can commit to that at all. It would be definitely precedent setting. It's something that's been vetted with our general counsel.
So here's the problem.
So,
Here's the
I think
problem,
if
which
you
is why
need
I
to-
offered a motion. If my motion prevails and we find that this is a positive, then the option is off the table for you. Your next choice is only an NOI, which requires notice.
That also does not.
Pardon me?
That also does not.
Yeah, no,
NOI
Wetlands
does.
Protection Act requires
Requires
notification
it,
of
so it
abutters.
does.
No, but Mass DOT is exempt from that as well at the NOI stage.
Exempt from a butter notification?
Correct.
No, there's a butter notification for linear projects. I've never heard of
Yeah,
Mass
I
DOT
mean-
being exempt.
I
from
mean, that's
butter
definitely a
notification.
higher level discussion we'll have to have, but
What-
we
what
don't do
are
that
you repeating your
across the
lawyer's
board.
comments to you?
Right.
What?
Repeating your lawyer's comments to you?
This is what I've done for the past 2 years. I
The
mean,
lawyer
you just
can
don't.
take a hike out there.
I think-
I don't want to listen to the damn
I
lawyer.
think,
Sure.
Sir, I think you may have been given some bad information, possibly.
No.
We've been at this for a while, we're kind of not new at this.
I
this
remember the
is a
125
requir-
hearings had a lot of people at them.
I mean, this is a requirement that has never been waived by this commission, and it's never been exempted by any authority. Even the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which held public hearings in this town for the
Transmission.
for
Gas
the
transmission.
natural gas transmission line from Sable Island, required a butter notification. They're really, all due respect to you, I'm not trying to be
Right.
insulted, there's
No,
just,
not at
there's
all.
no way out of that. This is, I guess,
Well, I was here a year ago, and actually for Project 607-985, and I actually was on a site visit with you for stormwater improvements, and we filed an NOI, and we did not notify abutters.
Well, we had the same discussion at that hearing where we had that information. I don't know that we ever made any decision based
Yeah.
on it, but we had,
I must have missed that meeting.
we
So,
definitely had this discussion.
All right, so look,
Which drainage one was that?
it was an impaired waters
So
project.
let's recap.
I-93.
We have a motion on the table that's seconded, which is about to send this to a public hearing.
Oh,
under a notice of intent.
495?
That's where we are right now. Now in discussion, we're considering
we're-
watering that down, allowing the RDA to continue, so long as we receive information and notify the abutters so they can come in and at least have the opportunity to be heard and us to review the project in the light of day.
I just want to
Those are the
say,
only two options.
but
So
in the option that you just laid out, I'm not committing to anything. I would entertain further information and furtherance of their application here.
Still
but-
might be or not, might be a positive.
But I
Still
don't
might be.
guarantee I won't vote positive at the end of the day. I'm not committing to anything, and I'm hearing from the applicant that he doesn't feel he's required, so, I mean, we can argue this ad nauseum, which
Yeah, I
would be
think that's
silly.
beyond the scope of the hearing now. This is for an RDA. I think if it comes to an NOI, we'll have that discussion when we get there.
So, is that what we have to do, to move it? Is that what you're telling me? Because if you're telling me that, let's not waste any time. We'll just call the vote. We'll vote a positive.
I don't
and
think-
then you're coming in with an NOI.
Yeah, I don't think I have any control over whether you call it positive or negative tonight. That's your vote.
We're asking you to cooperate with us, and you're telling us you're
Yes,
not
it
going
is our
to.
vote, but the thing is, what we're offering to you,
I don't-
continue as a request for
I
determination.
don't think he has the authority to make that decision.
So
Yeah, I
this is
can't
the-
tonight, I
this
can't
is the
tonight say
complete
whether or
solution.
not I want to continue to pursue an RDA or not. I can't say
Then
that.
All
let's,
right, okay.
then let's do
I
it
get
this
I
way.
get it.
Why don't you file a request to continue, or we can give you a positive on the RDA. That you can make that decision.
Mhm.
If the inevitable is a positive and they're going to file anyway, the only downside is they're losing 2 weeks in the process for us to render that decision at the next meeting. Should be rendered at the next meeting. If we, right here and now, say, based on information we have, it's incomplete, clearly it's jurisdictional, it is positive, therefore it is, that's where you were going, it is positive, then
So-
we give them the information loud and clear,
But
send
the
them
other-
back, and they file an
But the
NOI.
other option they have is they continue this, and then they end up deciding to continue with a request for determination. Over the next 2 weeks, they can gather all that additional information
He
and
can
present
speak-
it to us in the next
He can
meeting.
speak
So-
to his superiors and make the decision.
Well,
So hypothetically, let's
Yeah.
go with this. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Let's go with let's say we provide to you all of the drainage, the hydraulic report, and all of the drainage attributes for the project, and it does satisfy your needs. You think it's sufficient. You think it won't have any flooding impacts or it won't cause any pollution to surrounding resource areas, and we're able to thoroughly answer all of your concerns. Would you issue a negative determination, or do you still call this positive or applicable to the act?
We can't say that.
We don't know,
Can't
we don't
say
have the
that.
information.
We have to see what's in
Really
front of
can't
us.
say
I mean,
until we see the
Also-
information.
I'm not being invasive.
Yeah.
If in fact you're doing minimal work that affects our resource area, and all of the things that you're proposing are proposing net improvements, we all see those as valuable things.
But we have.
But depending on what it is we're seeing, what we review, if some of the things that we reach impasse and you're not necessarily agreeing, or if in fact the abutters who we think ought to know about this aren't able or allowed or notified to participate in this hearing process, it very well could end up still being a positive to get it to the
Yeah,
point of having the hearing.
Especially if your intent is not to notify the abutters directly, and your boss or whoever you report to says we're not doing that, then,
That's a deal breaker.
because we're exempt from doing it, whatever your thoughts are, then you're going to get a positive determination.
Yeah, and I mean, no disrespect to any of you guys, but yeah, I mean, I can't commit to notifying others.
Well, then
So-
I think we go with
So-
it.
And I don't, but the thing is, you'll find that, this is something that you cannot call it against your local bylaw or against the Wetlands Protection Act, because we are exempt from it. So I would say that that's something you can't call it a positive determination on. So
We can call it a positive determination based on the scope of work,
Right.
and we'll talk to
Right.
council
Okay.
regarding.
Yeah, I think so
All right,
too. I mean, if we were
we-
talking a repaving project or, no widening, the fact that we have widening, I
So
mean,
it's-
there's so many things that I
The
think.
last
we've got
project he was
solid-
talking about
solid
was
ground.
there were no abutters, it was in the middle of 495.
Sure.
Yeah, the thing is, too, you can play this
But,
game.
yeah, it's still happening.
We can also drag this thing on, and you can end up appealing to the state. and
We're not going to
to the state
deliberately,
directly.
but the result,
No, but the
that
result
it
may very well
would
be-
get dragged
But
on.
the point is, he's saying his lawyer says one thing, and our lawyer is 100% right all the time.
I'm gonna,
That's not necessarily true.
All right, we have a motion.
I'm gonna request, I filed the motion.
And we have a
You
second.
want to
It
call
has
the
a
vote?
second. I'm asking for the vote.
Call the vote.
I'm asking for the vote. I
All
think
those, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That's
So you're
unanimous.
filing an NOI.
So we just found a positive determination.
Okay, great.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'm just gonna text Heidi, I don't know what.
Next one is 242-1686, 1210 Osgood.
Which one is it?
1210 Osgood Street. It's this one.
Thanks. What is-
Mr. Chairman, do you mind where I send my easel up? Is one side better than the other? Do you have a
Doesn't matter.
preference?
Whatever's convenient for you.
Wherever the cameras can pick it up is what we want. We want our ratings to stay
That's what
high,
you should get. I hear your ratings are quite high in town. I sort of-
sadly.
We used to be a comedy, now we're a drama.
Drama.
Oh,
Getting it better.
disappointing.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Before we,
I'd like to recognize Mr. Howard and welcome him back.
Yeah, how many years of experience does he have? I mean, this is 2 years, I don't want him to be intimidated.
Are we talking about Mike now?
Yeah, the other guy has 2 years of experience.
Oh, well, he's right about one thing, where Mike pulled that out for us.
I got 24, I don't know. At this table.
And I'm going to need that veteran wisdom today for this ANRAD. I got to talk about some old things on this project. All right, let me get set up here. Jen, your files?
Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
So, good evening, folks. Again, for the record, my name is Mike Howard from Epsilon Associates. Here tonight on behalf of Princeton Development, LLC. With me tonight is Dick Bleakley from Princeton Properties. Right behind me to my left is Dick. And Joe Pesnola from Hancock Engineering is also with me tonight. Just administrative issues. Jen, I did just give you the proof of mailing. There is a DEP file number for this. I think you read it into the record, actually.
1686.
Thank you.
So who else? You said
Joe.
Mike, Joe, Dick?
Dick Bleakley. To my left from Princeton Properties,
Right.
and Joe from Hancock, I think you know. So we have filed an ANRAD with the commission tonight. We're seeking confirmation of proposed wetland boundary. Jen, I don't know if you want to switch there you go.
I gotta get your...
Seeking confirmation of proposed wetland boundaries. No work is proposed at this time. My client will file a notice of intent subsequent to getting the wetland boundaries locked in and approved by the Conservation Commission. I do know from speaking with Jen and briefly with Al leading up to the meeting that some of the commission members have some questions regarding some recent exploratory test pit work that was conducted on the property. We'll certainly get to that too, and that's on our list of things to talk through with the commission tonight. But if the commission agrees, I'd like to first walk through the ANRAD, walk you through the wetland delineation work, and then we can transition to other areas of the project. So I'll try and talk from the mic. If I stand up, Jen, will I still hear on TV, or do I need to?
Yeah. There's not much.
Hold on.
You can pull...
Mr. Producer, can the speaker stand up and still be? There you go.
Thank you. So I'll try and stay seated. If I stand up, I'll certainly speak into the mic. So I think the commission, certainly many of the members on the commission have been on the board for a long time, and this project originally was in front of the commission way back when in 2000, 2001 timeframe. This is the old Forgetta farm site. This was the Endicott Plaza development. As you might recall, back in the day, Billy Barrett was a proponent, and Epsilon did the permitting for it. It's a roughly 14-acre site. I know the commission's well familiar with it. It's kind of sandwiched between Route 125, Osgood Street, and the Lawrence Airport to the west. Just to refresh your memories, this is an old site plan from the 2000 timeframe that Marchand prepared. They were the engineers who supported Epsilon's permitting effort back in the day. Just to remind the commission what the site looked like, it was a mixture of active agricultural fields and greenhouses and storage sheds, and it's just an active farmland. The structures were demolished and removed from the site a long time ago. all that work occurred under a separate order of conditions, 242-1037. Again, that was for the Endicott Plaza project, which was a mixed-use commercial development. That project had received all of its permits and approvals, not only from the Conservation Commission, but from MIPA and Mass Highway and Planning Board, and a whole suite of permits and approvals were required for it. That commercial development commenced work in the early to mid-2000s after the permits were issued. The developer had started work on the site, and you'll see a bit further in the ANRAD filing. Virtually all the site was regraded and worked over. Roughly until, at least to my recollection, it's been a number of years now, but roughly until the recession hit and the market kind of crashed, and at that point the development stopped and the site was buttoned up and stabilized for future development. And that will become a more important issue as I walk you through the ANRAD. So what has happened to the site since that time? It's obviously revegetated itself. Most of the site is comprised of these upland fields. Portions of the site, particularly along the perimeter, are comprised of woody vegetation, mostly early kind of pioneer species that have come up over time with the disturbed conditions: birch, willow, quaking aspen, things of that nature, alder. Okay, so through this ANRAD filing, we're specifically asking the Commission to do a couple things. The first thing is we're asking the Commission to specifically approve the limits of 2 bordering vegetated wetlands that are located on the subject property. These are referred to as Wetland Series 1 and 2. And it's a little bit hard to see in this plan, but it's the 2 yellow areas that I've highlighted. Can you folks see that? If not, I can point them out. Wetland Series 3 and a nearby farm pond are located off-site on the Lawrence Airport property. And those are not highlighted on this plan, but let me point them out for you. This is the farm pond up here, and this is Wetland Series 3 over here. Consistent with the many other times that Epsilon has delineated wetlands out here, the airport kindly granted us permission to go out there and delineate them again. They've kindly granted permission for Jen to go out there and review the lines. Airport does not want an ORAD recorded against their property, so we're informally presenting those to the Commission. You don't have to formally approve them, but we wanted you to at least know where they were, be comfortable with the boundary, and to the extent buffer zones extend onto the subject parcel, you can be confident that they're accurate. So those are shown on the drawing included with the ANRAD. And then lastly, and this is probably one of the more critical parts of the ANRAD, we are requesting that the Commission find that what I'm characterizing as 2 relics or artifacts of stormwater BMPs and a connecting gravel swale that were constructed during the site development phase for the Endicott Plaza project are not jurisdictional wetland resource areas, and I'll delve into that in a minute, but that's the main issue of the ANRAD that I want to talk through with the Commission this evening. And those areas are shown as pink on this drawing that I have on the board to my right. So turning back to the 2 BVWs that are on site, again, these boundaries or similar boundaries were reviewed and approved by the Commission on a number of occasions since 2000. And just to give you some perspective, a determination of applicability issued in May of 2000, an order of conditions issued in September of 2003, 2 extension permits in 2003 and 2004, an ORAD issued again in 2005. All of these prior permits and approvals have obviously expired given the lapse of time. So accordingly, the BVWs were recently delineated by Epsilon in June of this year, and they're generally similar to what the different commissions and different agents reviewed over the years. There are some changes over time, and those are reflected on the delineation that's in front of the Commission now. We did conduct 2 site inspections with Jen to review these flag lines, and I'll let her speak to that, but I think we're in general agreement that the BVW lines that are shown in yellow are accurate, but again, I won't speak for Jen. I'll let her talk about that.
These are updated though, right, after the site visit?
They are. These reflect the tweaks that you made to the line, correct? So So it had been roughly a decade since the last delineation occurred and the cessation of work occurred. So from 2006 until now, the wetlands had not been redelineated until just recently, and that's what Jen's reviewed in the field. So let me just turn my attention to the two, what I'm characterizing as non-jurisdictional resource areas, if you will. So in all the years that we've done the delineations out here, we've never, Epsilon's neither identified nor has commissions or agents ever identified those as potentially jurisdictional areas. It's my opinion that while there is no doubt that these depressional areas have developed wetland characteristics through the passage of time, they have. That's documented in our ANRAD. There's soils, there's hydrology, and there's a predominance of vegetation. It is my opinion that they should not be regulated as jurisdictional areas, and let me walk you through my thinking and in support of my position on that topic. And I'm going to walk through one of the attachments in the ANRAD in a minute, but many, many years have passed out here, and I have been involved, and my firm has been involved since the beginning of this project in 1999 and 2000. Based on the information I've collected in our most recent delineation, it's my belief that these were created through the prior developer's requirement to stabilize the site when he was shutting it down, to fill in the temporary settling basins that were constructed as part of his permits and approvals, to maintain sediment controls during construction, and these are an artifact of that process. That's my belief based on the data that I've collected. And I'll explain furthermore in a minute. So let me, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to walk the commission through attachment H of the ANRAD. And I brought some hard copies of this, which I could pass out to the commission, because I'd like to flip through each one quickly, if that's okay.
They all have, I think Donna printed the ANRAD.
Oh, you have, do you have all, you have, oh, I don't know if you printed them all. Do you have the attachments at the end?
Yep.
The photos and,
Yeah, we have all the photos.
Oh, you have everything, okay.
yeah, so much for saving paper.
Yeah. I thought
Donna's
that
efficient like
I
that.
didn't know.
We violated the paperwork reduction.
We did.
I knew I was going to violate it, but I thought I needed to in order to try and explain this. All right, so if you would indulge me for a few minutes here, let's turn to attachment H of the NOI, and that's the section entitled "Supporting Documentation for Non-Jurisdictional Stormwater BMPs."
Where is
That's
that?
what we're missing. I don't think we have H.
We're missing-
Mine ends at attachment E.
Yeah.
H is
Go
critical.
figure.
Well, I wasn't going
All
to say
that
anything.
paper and not the right
That's why I
part.
checked.
I don't think I even have the, I don't even have the flag series, man. Are the flag series in here? Yeah, I'm looking at the plan, I'm not, I mean, your plan.
Mike, what you just had, is this
I've
all,
got it all.
is this H?
That's H.
This is H.
I just pulled H on the NOI.
Is this with the, I'm trying to pull it up on here. What's in H?
Sorry?
I'm just trying to pull it up so the viewing audience can see it.
It starts with excerpts from Wetlands Protection Act regulations. It's gonna,
Yeah, you gotta back up. You're at the end right now.
Of course I am.
Keep going. This is my story. Keep going. There'll be a divider sheet at some point, Jen. Keep going, a little bit more. A little bit more. Almost there. A little bit more. Keep going.
One thing.
I think it's one more page. Right there. That's the start of H.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let me just walk you through this. And a foundation to my position that these are not jurisdictional wetlands is based on the recent updates to the Wetlands Protection Act regulations, which your bylaw has adopted the same standards. And this first page in attachment H, and I've highlighted the relevant sections so I can kind of streamline your review. But essentially what this section of the regulation states is that provided stormwater management system components were designed, constructed, and installed after a certain date, in this case 1996, they do not create jurisdictional resource areas or buffer zones. So that first page is just kind of a summary that DEP spelled out. On the next page, you'll see the actual wording from the regulations. And again, I've highlighted them at the top of this Wetlands Protection Act 310 CMR 10.02. It is my opinion that these two areas I'm going to talk about a bit further were in fact constructed for the purposes of stormwater management, albeit on a temporary basis during construction to control runoff. And all work also occurred under a valid orders of conditions issued by the commission during that time period, as well as other permits and approvals. Okay?
I don't mean to stop you short, but I think what's been running through my mind as we've been looking at the history, there's one thing that's not clear on my mind, and I have to ask.
Yep.
So the valid order of conditions. Do I have some mistaken recollection that work commenced out there without notification? Was there the filling and the work, was there some things done outside of compliance? Did we issue?
Recently or in the past?
Way back.
This is way before Jen's. This is like
So I've been here
2000.
since
You're looking through
2008.
the file.
We have issued them an enforcement order for fill material being brought to the site. That's why the one thing I caution in what Mike has highlighted is that, provided it was in compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act.
That's why I raised this question now,
There is
because
an
I'm not sure there was compliance
The
back
only
then.
enforcement order in the file is one that allowed them to fill in
The basins.
the basins, which appears to have been done, which is part of the question of why this area still exists. But there has been work that's happened out there without an order of conditions, and not all of it can be documented.
And I'm not trying to throw a wrench in it, but if the
No.
provision is based on work done with the order of conditions that was valid and in place, if that work was not compliant with that order, does that corrupt that statement?
If I could, Mr. Lynch, hear me. It's a fair question. I get it. Let me walk you through the story, because some of these enforcement orders were, I'm going to use the term friendly enforcement orders. They were a mechanism that the commission used at the time.
When the permits
because
expired.
and your bylaw at that time only allowed 2 extensions, and the site was open and unstable. So there's a little bit of a history that kind of takes us through it. All right, so bear with me, and we can circle back on that. What I'm trying to do right now is just frame up my starting point. This is where I'm coming from, okay? And I'm basing it on the Wetlands Protection Act, the recent changes, and the adoption via your bylaw. So why don't we turn to the next section of Attachment H, which is, it's not a very good copy, I apologize. Keep going, Jen. I want to show them the cutout of the site plan. Okay. So Jen may have, I know she has better copies in her files because I photocopied this from your office, but let me just show you what this is. This is the record drawings referenced in the orders of conditions. And the reason I show this to you, and if you go to page 2, the reason I think this is particularly useful to your decision-making process is that it shows the permanent stormwater management basin that was reviewed and approved by the commission under that orders of conditions and where it was supposed to be constructed on site. The 2 areas up here are in very close proximity to that permanent stormwater basin. This is also the lowest property on the site, and it made a lot of sense during construction to have a lot of our temporary settling basins at that end of the site while the site was being worked. So I'm just bringing that up as context to show you what was originally complicated in this location.
In close proximity, but not in the same location. We
Well,
have that
I think
It's actually somewhere over in here is where that basin's located, if you pull out the full-size plan, which I brought.
okay.
Where it was proposed. What's shown in this plan is where it is. Now,
The permanent, let me get to that. The permanent basin was never built permanently when the site got buttoned up. I'm just trying to show you what the thought process was back then.
Michael, didn't you just say that this temporary feature is in close proximity to the permanent?
Yes,
So
that was approved by the commission. I'm not saying
fair to
that
say it's general vicinity?
I think it's, yes. Jen will check me if I'm wrong, so.
Trust me, I've read
We're both looking at this honestly and openly, trying to put this story together, so. Yeah.
The story's getting interrupted.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's okay, it's all good.
Okay.
So what you're looking at there, Joe, that's the record drawings from the orders of conditions. That's what you guys approved.
Where's the basin here?
Okay. I got
So
it.
where is this basin in?
It's a bad copy up there, but let me see if I can point it out to you.
I'm just trying to figure where it is.
Well,
When
actually,
I'm looking at
the heavy
looking at
survey
the-
line's pretty darn good.
In this wetland line is similar to what you're seeing in that little bird-like, beak-like wetland, that's what this is. Our new delineation's a little bit different from that, but you can see where it extends onto the property.
But that order of conditions is from 2000.
2000, I think. 2001.
Okay.
This is stamped 2000.
Yeah, it's double.
Well, November of 2000, might have actually got a...
I have the order for you. I think it's 2001, but I can pull it if I have to. Actually, I may have set it right on the sheet here. November 2000 is when the commission issued that order. I'm already losing my voice. I apologize. Okay. So that's just kind of giving you more of why I think these are where they are, okay? That's really what I'm trying to accomplish with that. Why don't we go to the next component of this attachment, and that's the historic aerials, or at least 2 of them that I included.
And I printed all of them for the commission as well.
Thank you, Jen. So the top aerial photo shows what the farm looked like. I have this dated as December 2001, and that was when the farm was still in existence and just before work had started at the site. I can't remember the exact date when work started at the site, but the photo below is August of 2003. And looking at that photo, you can see the entire site at that point was cleared and graded, and the work had started as per its permits and approvals at that time. And if you look carefully, as I'm looking carefully, you can see that, I wish I had a pointer. Can I approach Lou and just point something out?
Yeah.
You've got a mouse that you can...
Yeah, it's not overly
working?
clear to show where.
To you the area that I'm looking at. 'Cause what I'm trying to show, go back to the mic. What I'm trying to show with this graphic, this aerial, is that the applicant, as per its approvals, they worked this whole area, right through this area that we're talking now. They went right up to the edge of the limits of work as approved by the permits. That's what I'm trying to show with this photo. I'm trying to show the artificial nature of the origin of these areas. And the location I want to draw your attention to.
And prior to working, it was clearly an agricultural use, and there was no wetland there. It was a field.
Right, and that is also reflected on the existing conditions plan I have that Marshanda prepared. I'm going to bring this up so you can see it clearly, Joe. This is the 2000 existing conditions plan that Marshanda prepared, and it shows this wetland is similar to what our recent delineation is. These are the test pits that were all done at that time. This test pit, in my opinion, is exactly in the location of that smaller lobe that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Okay, so I'm just still trying to frame up all this anecdotal information as to why I think this is what it is. And I think that aerial photo helps that story as well. Okay, so let's turn to the next one. And I'm merely providing this is an excerpt from the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, the SWIP, that Epsilon had prepared for Bill Barrett back in 2003. And I included this because it gives you some dates as to when construction started. And remember, we have to be that 1996 was the magic number. We obviously are within that window. But it also talks about, a bit further in on this page, it also talks about our recommendation for these temporary sediment basins, temporary drainage swales to collect and control runoff during different phases of construction, as you are supposed to do when you have a NIPD's permit. Not everybody does it, but that's what you're supposed to do to control runoff. So this is more just background information. This is where it gets a little bit interesting, Joe. Let's go to the next one, which is the November 2005 ORAD that the commission issued. And maybe rather than me reading this, maybe if you folks take a minute and just read that paragraph that I've highlighted. And I'd also encourage you to read the second sentence of the first paragraph too, where the commission made a clear finding that there were no other wetland resource areas on the property at that time. But this will give you some additional context. And this is what I'm holding up, folks, if folks are looking for it.
It's on the screen.
Okay. When folks are ready, we'll go to the next piece of the chronology. You good, Al? Okay, so let's go to the next one, Jen, if we could. It's to January 2006, and it's a request from Epsilon to the commission to abandon some of these temporary stormwater BMPs. There you go. So again, I would ask you just to, it's probably just easier to read it yourself. Read those 2 highlighted paragraphs to give you some additional context. There's more highlighted text on the following page, too.
Was this refilling ever done?
Yes, I'm leading to that, yeah.
Some of it, right?
That's where I'm going. I think some of this is an artifact, and a decade has passed. I think some of these areas weren't completely filled in as maybe they should have been, or maybe perhaps it wasn't necessary because at that time we thought the site was sufficiently stable and no more filling was needed. You'll see the tone of this letter. The commission understood why we needed to do this. They understood we didn't have a permit to do that, but they didn't want stuff encroaching into the wetlands. So we're trying to minimize the amount of filling to stabilize the site without doing too much. I think, again, we're going back a number of years now, but that's my recollection of what we were trying to achieve back then. So that was the request. And then if we go to the February 26th enforcement order. Is that on the screen, Jen? Is that it?
That's what that is, yeah.
It is, thank you. Okay, so I use the term friendly enforcement order. The reason I say friendly is the commission uses this as a tool to allow us to do the work. We no longer had a valid permit, okay? And that's what this document shows. You can do it per these conditions, and you'll be okay with the commission. So that was in February of 2006, okay? Let's go to the photographs in April, May 2006. So again, we're going back 10 years now in my Epsilon files. I looked very, very hard, hoping I would find a specific photo of these specific locations. I don't quite get there, but I think I get pretty darn close based on some markers that I saw in the field. And probably the best example is on this first photo. If you can go back one, Jen. That rubble pile, from what I can infer when I'm out there, that still exists just like that. And I was able to orient myself in the field to confirm of where I think that photo came from. I can't tell you that photo is exactly in this location, but it's pretty darn close. And those rubble piles are shown on our ANRAD drawing. And all these 2 or 3 or 4 photos show the same thing. To your question, Joe, on these photos, you can clearly see the erosion control. You can clearly see that some filling was done to stabilize the site. But this is a good photo that's up here now. And this may be in the location. I can't say it for sure. But, I think what happened is they just didn't fill them back enough in these locations. I mean, in the test pits we did for our delineation work, it is missing topsoil. It's not there, and it hasn't developed over the past 10 years. But it's cut deep enough where there's the hydrology there now, and the wetland plants have come in, and the hydrology has come in. We also see evidence of gravel and stone out there along that connecting swale, for lack of a better word. And I feel confident that that test pit that I showed in the other plan is this for the permanent stormwater basin. Couple that with those aerial photos which clearly show this site, at least to my eyes, being worked up completely to the proof limits of work, completely artificial, unnatural condition. And that's the evidence I'm presenting to the commission, asking you to consider, based on all that history, that these should not be regulated as jurisdictional wetlands for those reasons. They were never meant to be wetlands. I think it's an artifact of the site stabilization process. I think it's an artifact of the filling in of the temporary basins. These were not filled back to the pre-existing grade. You can see that on the survey plans today. And I just think they're a little bit cut. I mean, 6 inches left can turn these things into resource areas, into functioning wetlands, and I think that's what happened. And then just to close it out, one thing I wanted to be comfortable with before I stood in front of this commission was to confirm that prior order that I've made reference to a couple times now was in fact closed out, and it did receive a certificate of compliance, and that's the last attachment in the ANRAD. So that's my story, and that's what I'm asking you to consider as part of your deliberation.
So one thing, Mike, this would explain how that upper area is dug out and doesn't have topsoil, but the lobe in the back is a couple feet deep. It has speckled alder around it. It holds water. You can see it in the aerials come 2010, 11, 13, 14. It's almost like it's something that came later.
I think it's the test pit. It's the deep hole test pit that was done in 2000. It's almost exactly on top of that location. I just don't think that was ever filled back in. They were designing the permanent basin.
Because everything else looks, I mean, this photo is to the north, which is the direction in which you look that is. You're facing, if you're facing north, that's on the north side of the site, this one. And that's, you know what prompted me? You can see in this photo, way in the back is, remember how we were seeing those erosion control signs?
Yeah.
See it on the left there in the top, in like mid-left, there's actually one of those. Remember they were just on stakes, small?
The do not touch lines. You used to put
Yeah.
in the middle. Yeah. Right.
You can actually see it in the picture.
You can actually
Right.
see it there on the top left. So this appears, I don't know, it just seems like that hole comes about later, as if someone...
Well, so let me clarify the whole. So I can't stand in front of you and say this photo is exactly in that location. I did the best I could by going out in the field and just trying to field truth it. But when I look at the test pit and the deep hole, the perk that, I think it was Lisa at the time, it was either John Chessie or Lisa Eggleston, maybe it was John, way back in the day, required as part of the design for the stormwater management system. When I look at that, it's pretty darn close to the lower lobe that Jen is making reference to. I mean, it's almost on top of it. And then coming into that is this clearly placed gravel and stone that tied into this larger basin that I think was constructed, just filled in poorly, and the site was just completely reworked. And I just have a hard time calling those jurisdictional resource areas, given the history of the site, given the careful analysis and paperwork and the way we tried to follow this for a long time. I have not been actively involved in this project since the 2006-2007 timeframe. Okay, so it has been a decade, but I try to put the story together to the best of my abilities based on what's in the record and what I'm seeing in the field. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions?
Yeah, how big is that hole? The hole in question that you're saying is the result of a test pit?
It's about 1,400 square feet.
1,400 square feet.
Keep in mind, though, Jack, too, I'm not saying that whole area was worked after.
It looks kind of circular. How big in diameter would it be?
Do you have a scale on you, Mr. Lynch?
Those days are long gone.
Where the scales are?
Try not to have so much fun, Joe.
That's 30 feet.
About 30 feet.
30 feet?
Yeah.
That's an awfully big test pit.
No, I'm not saying it's just the test pit. If you look at that area, this whole area was excavated and graded. I'm thinking the deeper portion of it was just a relic, an artifact of that test pit. That's all I'm saying for that location. It almost falls exactly on top of it.
I mean, it's not natural.
Definitely not natural.
Crater didn't hit there and leave a meteor didn't hit and leave a crater.
No.
It's dug, and it's not in the original farm.
No.
And it's not even in that earlier aerial photography that shows the site disturbed, but there it is today. So it was part of some continuing construction is what you're maintaining?
That's what I'm maintaining. Up until at least my knowledge of the site ended at that point, which is 2006, 2007.
So if I can encapsulate what we just said, first of all, I dread the day that Jen resigns and goes to work for consultant because we do a better job than you. But you did a great job otherwise.
Thank you, sir.
Embarrass me as well.
And,
I remember that seat well, Jen.
but really what it boils down to is you're suggesting this is land worked.
Yes.
Worked as part of construction.
Yes.
It's left fallow, it's gone unused and unmanipulated for all this time, and it's reverted to what otherwise would be a wetland area. But because it's in an area that was previously started to be used as a temporary resource, temporary erosion control, stormwater management area for construction purposes, that at the end of construction would have been converted over to a permanent stormwater management area. It's on that basis that you're claiming exemption.
Yes.
Non-jurisdiction.
Non-jurisdiction, but let me clarify that a bit further. I think we also, at that time, because it's the lowest point on the site, and that's where it made sense to do a lot of the temporary basins, and we had to do a bunch of them. The whole site was opened up, right, which is a problem from an erosion control perspective. My recollection is they started excavating the permanent basin at that time as part of their temporary solution to collect any runoff that headed to it.
My memory is going to remembering the sensitivity of North Andover Estates and trying to manage all of the mess at the very bottom of the site. With a large disturbed area, all opened up at once.
Remember it well.
And wrestling with the damn near unattainable task of controlling silt from the site.
Paxton soils.
And I'm remembering us requiring that at the very bottom as a way to deal with that runoff, because when you're dealing with all that acreage all moving down there was no way hay bales and so forth were going to do it. That we were requiring physical construction BMPs to handle that.
And we had these moving temporary settling basins throughout the site, George. They worked the site, and runoff was heading in a direction. We would instruct them to construct these temporary basins, and then they would be moved. And then at some point, they left a lot of these things, and they started just to go fallow, which wasn't a good condition for the site. And that's when we get into, well, we don't have a permit now to close these things up, and that's what led to those friendly enforcement orders. And you can clearly see in the paper trail, the commission had no desire or intent. It was all in good faith not to take jurisdiction over these areas. We were using them as BMPs. I honestly think that's an artifact of that process.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Jack, any questions?
No further questions. I think, from that ANRAD, from the, 2006 ANRAD that Marchand did the plan
This is
for?
2000.
2000.
Yeah, that's when the test pit was done. That led up to the notice of intent filing.
I mean, just thinking out loud, there were no resource areas in the areas of question.
It's cart pass and the farm field.
Right. And when I look at the old plan, with the proposed detention area, it looks like there's a riprap entryway to that detention area. It looks like it's in about the exact location where that hole is.
Pretty close.
I think it's clear to me that these were done. I agree with your history, and I would, from what I know, I would agree with your arguments.
Thank you, Jack.
Jim?
Mr. Howard.
Yes, Ms. Phillips.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
You're a great storyteller.
Thank you.
I also concur with you and with Mr. Maple.
Factual storyteller. Just let the record speak, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Just so that's clear in the minutes. Factual would be preferred.
Not just the raconteur.
Thank you, John.
Mike, I'm not there yet, but
I understand, Mr. Manzi.
I know that everybody wants to pin medals on you, and I'm just not there yet.
Just wants to pin it on you.
No, Mike and I are friends. I don't want that to interfere with the process.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at the December 2001 aerial photo of the farm.
Yep.
When it was still a farm. And on the northeast corner of the farm, I see what appears to be a farm pond, which my memory serves as that's how they water the crops. Is that what that is?
Right, and that's the...
That's offsite.
That's
Airport.
offsite. Let me just get your bearings out. So that...
But wasn't that how they watered all their crops, didn't they utilize that farm pond to water?
That's right. Let me answer your first question. That's right here.
Yeah. So that's an off-site pond. I can see it, but I see your plan.
They have fields back there too, Al? I don't, yes, I think it's reasonable
They
to
had the
assume.
water.
Yeah, exactly.
They were vegetable farms.
Right.
Intensive water.
The Fajettas owned acreage that included, this was way back before the airport, that owned acreage including the airport, and when the airport came in 30s, 40s? 40s, right after World War II, it was a training area, right? They took a lot of the Fajetta farm, but in doing so, some of the perimeter area, they left to farming use for the Fajettas to use. That's the history of that area that I
Right,
remember
I agree.
vividly. They were family friends, and I remember that story very, very well. So the fact that the pond is an old work project from the 30s, pond, and it was used, and when the airport took it over, they continued to let them use it.
Yeah,
So is the pond still there?
it is.
Yeah.
So,
And there's fields in the back too, Al, that I noticed those out there. I don't know if they actually use those anymore, or?
yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on back there. I really can't say. So then get to your March 06 picture.
Yep.
The area, I've listened to your opinion on it. Did you auger at all? Did you do any augering in there to determine what's down below?
For
In
this-
2006?
No, now.
Oh, yeah.
Have
Oh,
you-
yeah, there's tons of
So
data.
what did your auger reveal?
We,
interested in hearing that.
fair enough. So, well, let me answer the question this way.
This is the site, this site here.
Yeah,
The one
I
that-
can't, no, I cannot tell you specifically in that location, because
Okay.
I can't stand in front of you and say, yes, I'm 100% certain. But look at what I'm seeing in the field, I think I am. But yes, we did, as part of our delineation effort, we did an auger there, or did an auger, let me point the plan out.
Where you, yeah.
These are our plots, okay? So the plot, the 3W plot, which is the wetland plot, if you look at our data,
But is 3W plot the plot I'm looking at in the picture? Or
I think it's close, I can't tell you it's exactly.
Because this is the spot where we identified there's a little wetland marker on the tree line.
No disturbance zone marker.
Yeah.
No disturbance, that picture right there, that illustration right there. I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if you did any augering in that.
No, and I wouldn't know how to find that exactly.
I mean, wouldn't that have been helpful to determine?
Well, there's no, we do augers where there's some evidence of a wetland condition. That's what drew us to the back.
But you're asking us to rule this as not a wetland. You're asking us to say that this is not a wetland.
No,
This was-
let me clarify.
Yeah.
It is a wetland. It has hydrology.
Yeah.
It has hydric soils. Hydric soils in the sense, Al, that, and if you look at the data plot, we note that it's an excavated depression. All the topsoil has been removed, so it just goes right to subgrade, which makes it in the water table. I have flagged it as a wetland. That's the boundary based on the 3 parameters. What I'm saying to you is, based on the way the regulations are structured and the history I walked you through, it's not a jurisdictional wetland, because in my opinion, I think it was part of the stormwater effort.
So you're okay.
Yeah. I'm not arguing it's not a wetland. It is a
That's
wetland.
the distinction I was trying to make. Absolutely, it is a wetland.
Yes.
See, it's because it's a remnant or a relic to a construction activity as a construction BMP for stormwater management, therefore, it's non-jurisdictional.
That's my opinion.
So this is stripped to topsoil. The other wetland resource areas that you augured, did they have their topsoil on them? Or were they all stripped? Was everything?
No, those are all undisturbed. Those are just native.
So those are just undisturbed. So how much topsoil did you find on them?
Let me pick one as an example.
Anyone?
2W. You may notice I'm starting to do this with my reading glasses thing, but I'm not putting my reading glasses on in front of you at this moment, Mr.
I'm not
Manzi.
going to tell you when I started.
I understand.
I certainly need them.
Let's see. 2W. Okay, so what we checked off here, Al, is a histic epipedon, which means it has at least 8 inches of an organic soil.
As opposed to the one in the photo that doesn't have any, it was stripped down, indicating some type of
Ye-
recent alteration.
Yeah, yes,
That's fair.
yes,
That's fair.
yes.
Okay. I'm trying to
I understand.
establish in my mind the difference in
It's
the 2 areas.
It's a good contrast. The undisturbed wetland had 8 inches of organic material. This has no topsoil, it's just excavated into the
That
subgrade.
helps me start to get around,
Yep.
my brain around your position here,
I understand.
by noting the differences between the undisturbed and what appears to be a disturbed area.
Understood.
guess that's it, that's what I was looking for. I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
That was a good presentation. Also, because earlier today, I was in total disagreement with what we had here. You can see it's been excavated and it's been leveled, and that catch bait, the detention area that was on that other plan, that's pretty much where it is.
Pretty close.
So, I tend to, I don't know how that works if a wetland's created after the fact, is it?
That's where I was just,
jurisdiction.
I was just about to go to that when you were finished, to ask that question of Mike. From my understanding is, so let's take the work, and again, I'm not trying to muddy the waters, no pun intended,
Nope.
with this discussion, but there are people who do watches at home, and there are developers who watch us at home, and sometimes they try to rub our nose in precedent that we don't mean to set. But if, in fact, and we've had this in the past, if land has been disturbed for whatever reason that was previously non-jurisdictional and disturbed in such a way that it was left to trap water and hold water for some extended period of time, and it reverts to a wetland, if it were not in an area as part of an approved order of conditions where stormwater management on a temporary, permanent basis was proposed, it would be jurisdictional.
And that's
If in the middle of the site, a low area had trapped water in an area where it was not proposed to be a future stormwater, that would be jurisdictional. So
be jurisdictional.
We're only saying that is because it's exactly in an area where, in fact, stormwater management was being utilized and being proposed.
I'm trying to give you as much evidence as I can to make that exact case, and I'm giving you the avenue to do that by citing the stormwater standards, by including that specific section of the regulations. And all I can offer is what I presented. It's been 10 years, but that's where I'm at, and that's what I'm asking the commission. Through that language, recent language that was added to the Wetlands Protection Act, and this was in 2014, okay, so it's pretty new, to support my position within the context of the regulations that they should not be jurisdictional.
We had a lot, not the one of Campion Road, that was in the middle, there was a wetland in the middle. And we made them recognize it as a wetland.
And we've also done these.
Dozens, I mean, in the
Right, but
course
we've
of
also
my...
done some these the other way because they're pre-96, and it is date sensitive.
Yes.
It
Mike
is.
has pointed out. So
Mhm.
pre-96 or not done.
Bear Hill.
Right, or
Bear-
not done in accordance with a valid permit. Does not get you that exemption.
And that date's important because you can see the change in this excerpt I included. It used to be 2008.
Right.
So that didn't help clarify a lot of things for commissions, but they went back to the beginning of the stormwater standards, which was 96, which I think made sense.
Or if you constructed in an area that was previously wetland, Bear Hill.
Right? Exactly.
So there's lots of, reading this, trust me, is
Well, again, if anybody's
Some-
watching at home, I wanted to be clear that we're not, we know Mike's worked with us, Mike's worked for us, that this is clearly on the regs, and there are, the driving point here is a previously proposed and partially constructed and then abandoned stormwater management area. That's what makes this unique from any other discussion with any other permit that
We
we've
just
had in
had
the past.
something in the opposite direction, which was West Mills Swale, that we couldn't prove it was legally constructed under
That's
any
right.
order of conditions, and it was pre-96, and we considered it, sort of stormwater, but quasi-jurisdictional.
That's right, I remember that, yeah. Okay, so that's the only, so I'm not that sure if that
No,
answered your
that's what-
question.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm in agreement with you. Doug?
No questions.
Well, Mr. Chairman, question to Jen. So Jen, it all comes back to you. I do this to you all the time. You are actually the wetland scientist on the commission, and you're the closest thing we have that can battle Mr. Howard in the arena. So I want your recommendation, your opinion, please.
So for the jurisdictional wetland resource areas, we did walk them, made some minor changes, and Mike confirms that they reflect those changes. So the areas in yellow and the buffer zones associated with the offsite wetlands, I think that's how we confirm them in the ORADs, is basically we'll confirm the buffer zone that is cast on site. 100% in agreement. Mike and I have talked through this a couple times about the history, and I have argued with him back and forth about plans showing grades. He actually gave me a plan that overlaid grades from 2000 to the current. I was looking, you and I this morning were looking at 2004, and that was the one I had sent you, which is later, and I for some reason thought the order was more 2004, because we have like a revised, I don't think work started until 2004. I think that's kind of the area I was having trouble, because one of these existing conditions plans is from 2004.
I have some inspection reports from other folks, 2003, 2002, so it started
So
before
for some
then.
reason, there's a 2004 grading plan of existing grades, and I'm not sure why we have that, but that's the one we were looking back and forth to that showed some of these depressions. And the issue with this is, I wasn't here, so a lot of this was going on. These ORADs that you approved saying certain things were not jurisdictional, I didn't observe those or know. That's why I didn't give you a recommendation as to what to do with this area. I concur with Mike that, you know, the timing is right. It's post-96, and there was a plan, and if you agree that all the work was done in accordance with the plan, again, I wasn't here, and there's nothing in the file to say that it wasn't. But, you know, we don't have the SWIP and the layout of those basins. There are nothing in the file saying where those basins will be, and it appears the basins were filled back in, so why is there still a basin? You know, some of those questions I can't answer, and so I think that's where it falls back into your court. You were here at the time, you were receiving the reports, you were reviewing the project, you were closing out, you were issuing the enforcement orders. If you're satisfied with the historical material he's presented, then I am as well, but I don't have the firsthand experience that you do about that, so that's why that part of the decision I was leaving to you. We did review what's out there, and it was flagged. And it did come about because they did clear-cut a good portion of the site that they shouldn't have. Only portions of it are in the buffer zone, and it falls toward the back.
Under the prior development
No,
attempt?
recently.
No, that's something
This
that
is-
we need to talk about after we're done this.
Okay.
Right, and we did get a plan, and I can show you. It's buffer zone clearing only. It is not, it would have been actual resource area of clearing because some of it fell in that jurisdictional,
Right.
I mean, that flagged area that we're now discussing not being jurisdictional. There were no actual cutting of actual resource areas.
You had some photos at a previous meeting. You have some color glosses in the file somewhere.
I do.
Al, just before you respectfully, before you
Yeah.
you jump into that, as usual, Jen raises a lot of good points. We've had some really good back and forth, and Jen is challenging me to further make my case, and that's great. That's what I'm trying to do. So she's helping me do my job, too. I think what's really important is the Commission did issue a certificate of compliance. You felt comfortable enough in 2006 to close this project out and all this work at that time. So I think that's a helpful document to have. That's why I included that in the
I agree with you.
Yeah.
At the time, it was obvious that the project wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
And at the time it appeared, we had evidence that the project was stable. So we were basically going on stability. The certificate of compliance, which I voted on and I signed, was more along the basis of stability of the project.
Yeah, it was.
And not actual compliance with all the crossing the Ts and dotting the Is, because the project was dead. So as long as we had a stable site, we were satisfied. We didn't go back into the plan and start going through every acre and say, did this get done, did that get done? Because we realized that was a loser.
Right.
There was nobody there. There was nobody home.
It was almost like an interim site without a permit, and it was closed.
So the stability was really the key to us. So, I mean, I appreciate you offering up the COC as best evidence, but it was,
Understood, yep.
not really,
And that was a big part, too, Al, why we
Yeah.
did all the temporary basins. It was for stability.
We had some employment issues back in that era, too.
I do recall those
So our
issues.
ability to reasonably rely upon expertise was lacking as well. We had to have a lot of consultants come in to help us. So, yeah, you're right. You did
Understood.
it. You're right. There's no walking away from it, but I'm just trying to remind you that we were operating with one hand tied behind our back at that time.
Understood.
So, and I won't go into any further than that. So, the only thing I wanted to talk about was just that the cutting that took place, Mike, that took place prior to any delineation on the site, am I correct?
I want you to have it. So I'm going to ask Joe Pesnola from Hancock to join me. Joe, just before you get started,
But Joe didn't do the cutting, did he?
Joe can speak to the test bits. But let me answer your
Fall on the
question.
sword, Joe?
Let me answer your question to me, though, Al. So, first of all, Jen was kind enough to go out and look at these wetland flag lines with us before we even filed the ANRAD, which is really helpful to us, so thank you, Jen. But during her second time out there, we went to go back and look at some of these areas. That's when Jen, and I was not at that one, Jen, you were with Matt, I think.
The first one is where we saw the cutting.
Yeah.
In fact, even Matt was disoriented because the cutting hadn't been there when he flagged it.
When we flagged the wetland. So that's when we learned about it, and that's when Jen, independent of Epsilon, she reached out to, was it Joe? I don't know who you reached out to that point, but then it started to get resolved and Ben communicated. So with that, I'll stop babbling and maybe let Joe explain what happened.
Well, we had pictures at one point, I don't know where they are.
I don't know what
We have some pretty good pictures of the cut.
I think I emailed them to you.
Yeah.
Again, for the record, Joe Pesnola, Hancock Associates. I'm the project civil engineer, so it's my responsibility to coordinate all the team members, and we've got quite a few team members. Mr. Howard, we got Ben Osgood, who's doing the survey. We had Kevin Martin from UTS doing borings for geotechnical purposes, and my staff that was doing stormwater management testing for the future project. We did have an understanding that some of the flags, that the two on-site areas that we're not questioning the jurisdiction on were flagged, and we had a map of those. We laid out our testing based on the assumption that we were going to be out of any jurisdictional areas, any buffer zones, based on the knowledge that we had. We actually didn't rely on, field guesstimating on the location of these tests. We actually had them surveyed in. And then that's when we failed as far as making sure that we stayed out. What I've given you is just a location of all of the testing that we did do. You will note that in that western portion, in this area that we've been talking about all night, we didn't understand that to be a jurisdictional wetland because we had reviewed the mapping from before, and we had the preliminary feedback from Epsilon that those were there. So that was our biggest kind of indiscretion. But you will note that they weren't within the resource area proper, but they were within buffer zones and should have been something that we came before this commission before we went and did. Our intentions were to do that testing outside of all buffer zones. And I take full responsibility. If Jen and Mike collectively believe that some buffer zone mitigation or that needs to be done, would certainly do that. But it's my understanding that there was vegetation cut and that wasn't grubbed, and there's no exposed soil there, so there's no danger of erosion, which might harm the wetlands.
So let me ask Jen, so is there any restoration required in your opinion? Any planting?
It'll depend on, most of the impacts were to the rear wetland down in the sort of upper center corner there. If you find the other areas non-jurisdictional, most of the impacts were in the buffer zone there, and I'd say they're pretty close to 50 feet away. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little closer, but there still is a buffer zone, so I mean, we can, when they do the permitting, if it's an area you want restored,
But it's not within 25, no disturb.
I'm fairly certain it's not within the 25, but I didn't measure.
Okay. I think Jen's right, but we will confirm that. What we can, let me answer the first part of the question. I do agree with Joe, and I think Jen would concur too. The site is stable. There was no grubbing. There's nothing that's going to run off, at least in my estimation. What we can do, Al, because I think my client's going to be moving pretty quickly forward with the notice of intent, to the extent it makes sense to do some restoration in that area or other areas that Jen has identified, we'll roll that into the filing and have the commission review it at that time. And we'll also have a permit to do the work at that time too. But we will look at it, we'll address it. Anything that's in that zone that you want restored, we can certainly work with you to do that.
Okay.
That'd be my commitment to the commission.
That's fair enough, I think.
Just a question about two of the locations, test locations, 2U and 2W.
Those are soil test pits for the wetland.
Okay,
Not
the
test
clearing
pits.
is not associated
No,
with
not
those?
No, those are my wetland plots.
Okay. So the main thing is we have to decide what the, if those are wetland jurisdictional wetlands or not.
Well, I guess, this is an ANRAD, right?
Correct.
Right. So we
So
have-
what you're asking us to do is vote on the ANRAD as submitted.
What I'm asking, to make it crystal clear for the commission,
Let's make it.
in the conclusion section, I specifically identify which flags I want the commission to approve. These are flags that are on my client's property. There's also language that acknowledges the off-site wetlands.
Where's your conclusion section, Mike?
Is it on the front one?
Yeah.
Is it on the first filing? The first, this one here? Gotcha.
Page 7.
You buried us with paper, Mikey.
I tried to keep it organized, Mr. Manzi.
Yeah, it's a tactic.
Mike, could you go back to the one that had the multiple colors of the resource areas too, because that was helpful.
You find it?
So basically, you're asking us to issue in, well, you're going to, it's in the letter that they're about to summarize, but it's not make a decision, not render them as resource areas of the airport in those two areas, which is the 3 series and the FP series?
Correct.
But to recognize those for the purposes of offsets when you do your 25s and 50 no disturbances,
Right.
but not render a decision on them.
Right.
But to render a decision on the areas in yellow, which is the 1 series
1-1 through 1-12,
and the
2 series.
2 series.
2-1 through 2-9, and flags 211 and 212.
Great.
Those are all the flags that are on our property.
Show Joel.
And to determine that the WD series and the ED series are non-jurisdictional.
For the regulatory reasons I cited in the end, correct. That's what I would ask the order to reflect.
Okay.
I might word it slightly differently in that we would,
As a motion?
in order to establish the limits of it, we would just approve the buffer zone as shown on the plan.
That's fine. The airport's obviously fine with showing the lines. They just don't want an ORAD recorded or something locked in on their property. They've given us every opportunity to do this, but,
We're very familiar with it.
yeah, I know, yeah. I think they're getting a free, well-done delineation, and they should take advantage of it, but that's just my
I'm not
humble
even going to
opinion.
render an opinion.
Fair enough.
This is the new me.
Fair enough.
We're not going to draw it out.
Fair enough, I withdraw.
Nice try.
I withdraw
Randy
the comment.
Christensen does a good job, too.
Well done, Mikey, but. So the conclusion page is what Joe just referenced.
Well, I was just trying to summarize, but if Mike summarizes it on page 5,
Yeah.
or page 7
Page
of
7,
section 5.
5.0 conclusion. But Jen wants it worded differently.
No, I can.
The offset
you
piece
can- I'm just saying, we would actually confirm that the buffer zone shown on the plan associated with the offsite wetlands, is accurate. Because you have to, the form only allows you to put what is accurate or what is not accurate or what is changed. So as accurate, we're going to put the buffer zone associated with the offsite wetlands, as well as the actual wetland flags, which he references.
You're essentially approving the flags on the airport property and kind of.
Is the buffer zone shown on this
It is,
ANRAD plan?
yes.
It
Is
is.
it shown for
Yes.
the offsite?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yep.
And then, as he points out, that WD through WD9 and ED1 through ED20, you would confirm are not jurisdictional. They wouldn't be referenced on the plan. Again, I will write something up separate, an attachment that kind of summarizes what Mike says.
Correct.
Any more questions? Motion?
Go back to that page.
Sorry.
Yeah, Joe, right here.
You got it right there, open?
Yeah, if you want
All right, so I move that we issue an order of resource area delineation that accepts the wetland series 3, 1 through 6. Strike, that's the offset. That accepts WD1 and W.
No, 1-1 through 1-12 is what we're
Yeah, 1-1
confirming.
to 1-12 2-1 through 2-9 and 2-11 through 2-12. And additionally, the buffer zones to wetland series 3-1 and 3-6, offsite wetlands 3-1 and 3-6, and the buffer zone to off-site wetland FP1 and FP17 are jurisdictional and accurately depicted on the plan. And lastly, that the commission finds that wetland series WD1 through WD9 and ED1 through ED20, though statutory wetlands, are non-jurisdictional in accordance with the provisions of the regulations as previous stormwater management areas.
Second.
And what's saying is that that is not jurisdictional.
So we just talked about the on-site wetlands
Right.
are, the off-site, the buffer zones that are on-site are jurisdictional, and the areas that are in this whole discussion about formal stormwater management are not.
Okay.
Those are the three things, three separate things we talked about.
We have a motion and a second, right?
You got a motion and a second, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate your time. Thank you for your patience.
Mike, you're so
Yeah,
good
let
at
me-
storytelling, you should start writing books.
Who says I haven't?
Don't encourage him.
Next one is 242-1685 and 242-1684.
Let's continue.
Did they continue?
I'm just curious.
No, they should have.
Make sure that's right.
We have two questions on this. One of them is no new materials were submitted, and we have comments from DEP that have not been addressed. So,
We're talking about 1684 and 85, Mr. Chairman?
yeah,
Yes,
So-
so the consultant for Keolis is here.
so, I don't know what we have to talk about. So the DEP recommendations are talked about, and we haven't got any new materials, so we can't even look at it. So my suggestion is that you continue.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Dave Gordon with Peer Consultants, and here today representing Keolis Community Services on the replacement of these two cattle crossing culverts. The applicant has previously submitted an NOI in which the applicant details how these cattle crossings and how the project complies with the performance standards of the Wetlands Protection Act to the maximum extent practical for this limited project. As the current conditions at these culverts may pose a threat of rail deviation, which may pose a health and safety risk to those who use the rail system, the applicant respectfully requests that this commission vote to close this public hearing and encourages the commission to vote to issue each of these projects in order of conditions.
Okay?
So first, I don't think the commission accepted that that the limited project status applied.
Nor did DEP.
Well, they didn't address that, but we did, because I think the culvert replacement statute for limited projects applies to roadways. I think we discussed that at the one hearing. And second, you're not going to address DEP's comments. They specifically issued comments related to floodplain and BLSF.
The applicant understands the questions that have been previously communicated, and the applicant has instructed us as their representative to respectfully request that this commission vote to close this public hearing, encourage the commission to vote each of these projects in order of conditions, and so the applicant may comply with the track safety standards under the Code of Federal Regulations.
That's fine.
So just so we're real clear, I'm just repeating it so we're clear. You're requesting that we close and issue a decision within 21 days.
The applicant is requesting that you close the public hearing.
Issue a decision, issue an order of conditions.
Yeah, you got a broken record.
Yeah, all right.
Vote to
I got it. It's not lost on me. I understand. I understand the position you're in. I get it. Mr. Chairman, he's requesting we close. I'm happy to move that we close and issue in 21 days.
So it's a request to continue. The applicant can certainly make such a request, and this commission continues. It just makes decisions of whether to continue or not based on the receipt of information, and we've received comments from DEP. The applicant is saying that they don't want to. I'd like them to reconsider. I think for the sake of another 2 weeks, I think they should go back and reconsider the impacts. This BLSF issue in proposing to simply insert a smaller culvert into the existing culvert and displace floodplain is legitimate. It's real. We flagged it out 4 weeks ago. DEP flagged it out in their comments. I would respectfully disagree, not close the hearing and continue it for another 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, and give them an opportunity to reconsider their position and submitting that information and issue a decision at that point upon final refusal to submit data in accordance with what we requested. So I make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 4
Let
weeks.
me withdraw my motion, and then you can,
Not without the-
I'll withdraw my motion to close, and I'll defer to Mr. Lynch.
Permission.
Under the bylaw, this would be the one night I didn't bring my copy of the bylaw, but under the bylaw, you can continue the public hearing without the applicant's permission, but I think under the Wetlands Protection Act, you can't.
So they're filing into both, correct?
Correct.
Please note that the applicant is not, the local bylaw is not applicable to the applicant in this case, based on the statutes previously
I
provided.
think actually, yes, they did submit the evidence, and that is in the statute, that it is not a local bylaw filing. So under the Wetlands Protection Act, you cannot continue without the applicant's consent.
Okay?
Okay, well, we gave them an opportunity to
So I guess I would vote, because you're not going to receive the information you're asking for, that a denial needs to be issued, but it needs to be I wasn't prepared to issue a denial.
Why do we have to give a denial? Why can't we condition? Why can't we issue the condition?
Approve the project.
We can approve.
We're not going to design a project for them. and
approve
they-
the project with requirement that they
Yeah, we just-
comply
yes,
with the compensatory flood storage
Yeah.
and BLSF requirements,
The design
and submit
stand-
evidence prior to commencement of
Design
construction.
standards are there.
Approve the
We're not-
project.
we're not
Let them
designing.
appeal approval. Let them appeal approval.
Okay, we
Yeah.
can close.
Yeah, we're not going to, 21 days, we can decide how we're going to do that.
Doesn't comply
with that requirement.
But that's not our
In
problem.
21 days, I have to issue
But how come-
something. Oh, you know what? We have a 3-week continuance, so this is going to prove problematic.
That's why we wanted to continue it.
Right.
We're not going to be meeting
We're not going to
again
meet it.
within 21 days.
No, no,
One more meeting.
we do have one more meeting. Sorry, it's the next meeting that we can't. Yes, we're good.
So we're good.
We have one more August meeting. So you can just close
I-
and issue a decision in
Then I'll-
21 days, as Al.
I'll renew my motion. I move that we close the public hearing and issue a decision within 21 days or less.
Second.
All those in
It's
favor
in
say
here
aye.
somewhere.
Aye.
Opposed?
Who seconded? Because I just lost my
Deb.
page.
Deb.
Just lost my page. Okay, Al, Deb, got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How you feeling? You feel lucky?
You guys still want to do this?
You picked a bad
You
day.
can
Picked a
leave right
bad
now.
day.
Yeah, we're in a great
I'm not
mood.
saying walk, you should run.
Yeah.
We're eager.
I wouldn't be eager.
Mr. Gata.
Because you didn't supply what we asked for.
Well, we know we did, so.
Well, we asked for an overlay of the existing development on the proposed plan, which this is not. That said, Heidi did that work for a section of the project. You also didn't provide a list of the discrepancies. Here's Heidi did. She did 3, but I was going to refer to 1 as I try to point out what the work she did shows.
Do we have a copy of that, Jen?
I can as soon as I present it to them. So, so you didn't provide a list of the discrepancies, but the easiest one.
That wasn't where we needed to provide.
That was specifically laid out in the enforcement order. It asked for an overlay of the existing conditions on top of the approved proposed plan. And then it second asked for all of the discrepancies to be called out.
Right, and we intend that that be the case with that right-hand block that's shown on the as-built plan.
Okay, but It doesn't show, I mean, first look at the wetland restoration area, and you can go through Heidi's plans. The wetland restoration area is smaller than was proposed. It calls out the flared end pipe, but it doesn't point out that that is not constructed in the location that it's supposed to be constructed. It just says flared end pipe. It doesn't indicate that the wetland between building I and H was filled. Flared end pipe also, I don't know, that's why I'm getting thrown off. But, so Heidi colored up a plan. You can see that the yellow on the plan is the wetland replication area. You can clearly see between the two plans.
I don't have Heidi's colored plan. Where?
There's
In
two
what?
copies floating
Oh,
around.
in the, okay, in the photos, I'm sorry.
Sorry, she had to color these all up today, given what we had received.
Sorry about that, no, go ahead, proceed.
You can see the wetland replication area as it was proposed to be constructed and as it was constructed. You can see where the pipe was supposed to outlet versus where it outlet. She took Patrick's plan on the right and used the proposed plan on the left. We asked that those two be overlain so that this would be a lot easier, but we did it the hard way. You can see in green the outlet of where it was supposed to be at the wall adjacent to what was supposed to be wetland. Currently now it's in the wetland. That's the green. And that area is no longer wetland. All of the stairs have been highlighted in orange, stairs and decks as they were to be constructed. And you can see where they are now. And that was just her very beginning. And then you can see the wetland line on the proposed plan with the wetland line on the current as-built plan. And now I'm going to share these with Patrick so he can see what I'm looking at as well.
Thank you.
In a conversation Heidi had with Mr. Hingarani, he tried to say that between H and I that the wetland fill was approved, but nowhere in any of Patrick's modification letters does it say that further fill of the wetland would occur. And she also points out areas where the split rail fence isn't installed, but that isn't necessarily a violation. It's just something that hasn't been done yet.
We're looking at a work in progress.
Right. So I'm just saying she called that out because she was doing the comparison.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Oh, this is your plan. So this is what you have. This is what Patrick, this is what we received in response to the enforcement order. But Heidi has done all this additional work to highlight what the areas are. And then she did some photos, which you also have and which you can have as well.
Okay,
It's
so.
become really arduous, really arduous.
Yep. So may I comment?
Sure.
Okay. So I have not appeared before you in this context. So let me try and give you some context. First of all, almost everything that we're discussing and we're looking at has been in place and existed for 9 months to a year. So this is not something sudden that has just occurred. And the wetland line that is shown in the right-hand panel, I'm looking at Heidi's and I'm also looking at mine, is the exact wetland line that was approved by the Commission in November 2014 when we went through several different hearings with you on a very similar issue. And so that hasn't changed whatsoever. That is the line that it's been there for several years, and the wetland points are exactly where they were then. I've gone back out and double-checked them during the as-built process. So there have been no additional wetlands filled whatsoever. And I want to also note, too, that there's a little concern in that I'm looking at Heidi's map, and her...
This is the area that's been filled. There was wetland, this came
Yeah,
up farther, but this is where the
exactly.
wall was supposed to be constructed, and this was the wetland that was to
Yep.
remain. The
No.
wetland is now here.
No, this was to be filled.
No, you look at all the plans, that was not to be
If
filled.
we go back, Jen, to I think it's November 2014, and I brought copies of it with me.
We have them all.
Right. That was part of what was
Was that a
approved by the
modification in
Commission.
November 14? Because the project was permitted before that.
Yeah, we have a modification plan that we spent a lot of time before you looking at. And the line that's out there now is the exact line that the commission approved. Bill that had taken place was...
I don't have a plan in front of me, but I'm going to have to just
Joe,
dig my heels in and just say, out of all the efforts we were doing to even let you get up to the edge of the wetland, I can never remember ever contemplating, ever allowing the filling of the wetland.
No,
we-
that's what that replication area was about.
No, that
That was
replication
not-
area was filled wetland. You filled that during the work. We noticed that right away, and you said, whoa, you're right, we weren't supposed to be in there, and that was your whole, that's the point where your two survey lines didn't meet up. That had nothing to do with replication for any other area.
Yeah, that foundation was about 40 feet. Jen, how you picked it up? You both these benchmarks on either side, you went like...
Well, I think first of all, we have to emphasize that the line that's out there now and the line that's shown on the as-built plan is the line that the commission approved almost 2 years ago. There's no variance whatsoever of any kind at all. There have been no wetlands filled since that period of time. So we're not looking at new wetland fill of any kind, not a square foot. That is not the case.
Except
Jen.
between H and I. That
Nope.
is the area that was not approved to be filled. The
Nope.
relocation of that outlet was never approved.
Okay, so let's take a look at the actual plan. If we're going to go back and forth verbally.
We get, the reason why each of these modifications came with a list of the changes that were to happen. Don't point out changes in the plan to
We
me.
want to look at the record. We want to look at the
Pull
record.
out the letters that you sent to me that said what the changes were on each of these plans. Because, again, the hard part of this is every time you give me a plan, if it's not overlain with the previous plan, it's just one more plan that we have to go back every time we look at these things. We're now on modification, 8, whatever, but it's impossible unless you list out the modifications for us to pick up on every change. So please point out in one of your letters where it says you will be filling additional wetland.
Okay, John, again, I'm saying to you that there has been no additional wetland fills.
And Heidi and I disagree.
I know you do, and so that's what we're here to talk about.
Okay.
I want
Here's
to
the
be I want to be
2000
real
please speak
careful
to the
of mixing
commission.
of documents. The record is the record, and our record is preserved and is sacred.
Here's the wetland analysis and the modification associated with 2014.
Can I interject? Can you go back to the enforcement order that we issued 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
All right. Let's just read for Mr. Garner what we asked for in that enforcement order. Let's stop right there.
Okay.
Because we're not going to
We're
start
not in
throwing
the
paper around here. It's
enforcement
not going to happen, okay? It's not going to happen. This is not going to be the shoebox approach.
But both Heidi and Jan have been saying there have been additional wetlands filled, and I want to show you that there have not been additional
That
wetlands
plan
filled.
doesn't mean anything.
That
It's
plan-
by the record.
This plan was requested by the commission, accepted by it 2 years ago, and it documents what...
And we want a current conditions as built now. What happened 2 years ago is irrelevant anymore.
Well, it's not irrelevant.
So the commission asked,
It confirms what's out there.
It doesn't confirm anything. We asked for an as-built.
so the
So
commission
I'm saying
said,
that the as-built is identical to what's shown on here.
We don't know that. We've never gotten the as-built.
well, an
Well,
as-built
this is right
plan,
here. I have full-size copies of it if you'd like to see it.
You wanted the
you
ego?
want me to read it, or you
Yeah,
want to read it?
You can read it.
An as-built plan shall be submitted to the Conservation Department showing all work associated with buildings F, I, and K from wetland flag C39 to C48 by August 5th, 2016, for discussion at the August 10th, 2016 Conservation Commission meeting. The as-built plan shall be overlain on the most recently revised and approved plan of record presented to the Conservation Commission. A list detailing all discrepancies from the proposed work shall be provided. See attached. And we must have restated that in our letter.
So did that happen?
No.
Well, I intended it to happen, so let me have just a moment to explain. The plan that you see before you was lifted directly from the last approved conservation plan, which is the November 2014 plan. I took that out of the CAD drawing. I shifted the as-built.
Please, sit down.
I shifted the as-built conditions
Stop
directly as an overlay on that plan. And then on the two panels, the left-hand panel shows what exists today, and the right-hand panel shows what was part of that approved 2014 plan that does not exist on the site. And I can show you directly what, for instance, this plan shows retaining walls here that were part of that 2014 plan that are not built here. It shows retaining walls in here that were approved but have not been built in this area. It shows stairs that exist in this section. It shows a vegetated flow dissipator here that is not part of the as-built conditions, but it was part of the approved plan. And it shows another vegetated swale in this area that does not exist either. So the intention was to show you what exists out there through this panel and what was approved but not built in this panel. And we can clearly show more detail if you know, you feel that it's lacking.
So just from a drafting perspective, make sure I understand what the words say. On the left-hand panel, it says as-built condition. That's what's physically out there today in whatever condition of completion. It's what's actually there as of the date of the survey.
Exactly.
On the right-hand panel, the word as-built conditions, just like the left-hand one, it's confusing me. It's as-built with proposed unbuilt. So basically, you're trying to take the same plan of what's out there and by some heavier drawn line are those improvements that are not yet built but previously approved?
Yeah, I almost noticed that differentiates that. And there's a note in here too that says all items are proposed to indicate unbuilt improvements. Said unbuilt improvements are superimposed.
So what we're not seeing there, and what we would typically want, would be to overlay it in the old way we used to do it, the archaic way, is we want them to the same scale as the approved record drawings, so we could put them on the light table and line them all up. But what I'm not seeing is what was the approved plan.
Okay, this was the approved plan. That's what I'm
Okay,
trying
yeah,
to
one
show
thing
you.
we ought to do.
But we needed to overlay, and that's what we asked for.
What we need to do, I think, from what I'm hearing,
Joe, they're the
is we need to agree on what was the last approved plan. What you say was, and what Jen says was the last approved plan according to our records.
I agree.
Can we agree on what that plan is?
But there is no one plan that represents all of the modifications.
Right.
So the plan that Patrick's referring to is one that we asked that showed distances from the wetland line to each of the structures. And that plan is the 2014 plan. And I have the things that were listed as being part of that modification, because with each of these, every time they change a plan, it's impossible to pick out everything that gets changed unless it's detailed in a letter. And so in the 2014 modification, which is the plan you're saying you're overlaying on, correct?
Correct.
The things that were approved on that plan was a modification to adjust the width of Cardinal Point roadway to account for a surveying error that includes lengthening the retaining wall between the F and the H building and slight adjustments to building footprints. Construction of a wetland replication area as mitigation for wetland alteration between the F and H buildings. This area shall be monitored in accordance with condition. This is now about that error in surveying and why that wetland replication area had to be constructed. The plan that was submitted then showed that and was approved in a modification, but
This one says this is the two.
we didn't then check that whole plan that it complied to every previous plan ever issued. All we did was approve those modifications, and they were shown on a plan. That's the 2014. So if you look at the 2014 plan, it does contain that error that no longer shows the wetland between H and I. That I understand, but that isn't the record plan for what happens between H and I. That's just the record plan for these modifications. It becomes so very confusing.
Those modifications are the same identical area that we're looking at.
No, this is between F and H, not between H and I. We're not comparing apples to apples, which is why what I want is a plan overlaid on, I mean, we can discuss, and Patrick and I can discuss outside of this hearing, what is the record plan given the different areas. But this is all that it was approved in the modification in 2014.
So does that make reference to a plan, a record, a plan that has the date?
It references what was submitted with that, for the record. It references
I'm holding on November 25.
sheet 7 of 19, drainage and utility plan 1 to 20, revision date November 25th, 2014.
Peter, it's this one.
And it also references a modified construction plan dated November 4th, 2014, revised November 14th,
I want to
2014.
make sure this is incorporated into this. This is part of what you proposed.
And these are the approved modifications.
You know, we're doing business that ought to be done at the
November
administrative
14th.
level in an office. We're doing it from the table here during a hearing.
But what I'm saying is, we didn't get what we asked
Right,
for.
and that's where Al was going.
That's all, I mean, I'm trying to narrow the conversation down to the salient point, which is we made a request in writing through an enforcement order, and we granted an activity that was outside of the cease and desist. We gave you permission to dig a hole, and we gave you permission to take the fill from the hole off-site. We've been trying to work with you.
I agree.
We asked for, very specifically, that what Jen just laid out, and in Jen's opinion, we didn't get it. So we rely upon Jen. So we're not gonna throw papers around here. It's just not happening.
Totally agreed.
It's just not
We
gonna
don't
happen.
like the plan, we'll redo a new one.
I want, what we're asking.
Yep.
My whole, since this project began, it's always been my concern, as you work into the corner, things go a little bit awry.
There's no room left to fix anything in the
There's
end.
no room to fix it. So, these were my concerns, that's why we asked, when we did the phases, you do phase one, you complete it, that went perfect. Phase two went perfect, then we had an issue. At phase three, the building was in the way, utilities, you had to dig utilities, and we let you build that building to make your project go forward.
Yeah.
We've done we've tried our best, but now what's happening is we're getting into that critical area, and things are starting to waver a little bit, and that's why Jen asked for the overlay. So up until this point, we're all on the same page.
We thought we were. The
were.
problem is, as we built ourselves into the corner now, it's becoming apparent that the things are tighter than we originally thought. And when Heidi's, and the stairs are going on and we're seeing more things happening, it becomes, you can't see everything every time you go out.
Right.
We noticed the area between, behind H was altered when it shouldn't have been altered. That was way back when, and it was replicated. It's now small. We notice things but you can't, every time you're out there, you can't pick up on everything. And it's only as things have, the final things have started to happen, and Heidi's look, well, that seems to be a lot closer, or the edge of fill seems to be a lot closer than we originally thought. And you pull out all the plans and you start looking at things again. They're right. Some of this stuff has been in place for 9 months, but we have not necessarily noticed all of it until now. We've noticed bits and pieces, and that's resulted in some modifications, but we definitely have not sort of pulled all this together until some of the final things started happening. One of the big ones was Heidi noticed that the stairs were not on in accordance with the proposed plan. That resulted in closer looks at the plan, and Heidi was saying, well, now that I'm looking at H&I, I'm noticing that this outlet pipe was supposed to be back here at the wall, and it's up there at the wetland, and now I'm realizing that the wetland was supposed to be at the wall. Again, that's been in place for some time, but it wasn't until Heidi looked at the stairs and then looked at the plan again that she noticed that particular discrepancy.
So these deviations from the approved project have become apparent in the past month or so. Last meeting, and you weren't here, Patrick, we tried to take an approach where we could, as quickly as possible, remedy these variances one by one. Get a list as requested, have the overlaid plan as requested, make it very clear what needs to be done, and then attack them on another enforcement order under a fairly urgent date certain for each one of the items. We're trying to work with you to get our needs met, to comply with the project, the approved project, before it gets out of control. Now, your guys wanted to keep working in a limited fashion, and we agreed to let you do that. And we had all assurances that every item on the CEO would be satisfied by tonight, and so that we could get at the business of correcting these variances. And it doesn't seem like it's happening.
Yeah,
that's the thing, and it's. There's some questions, and again, I agree with you, Joe. These are administrative things. There's some questions about, some of the distances, some of the surveying, whatever might be off. Some of the distances are off, and we had that question back in 2014 where we did find a variance, right, fortunately in the favor of the project. But I mean, I'm of a mind to say, you know, okay, we tried. We got assurances that we felt that we could move forward at a reasonable pace to get these variances resolved. It doesn't seem like it's happening, so I think we got to step back, and before we create more problems like these, and worse problems, because they do seem to be getting worse the closer into the corner we get, I think we're better off just stopping future construction, cease and desist, and pluck these off one by one.
So let me respond if I may. First, there's room on the site for everything to be built per plan if that's the requirement. That we're not losing room. We haven't. It's the same amount of space that's been out there for the last couple of years. Nothing has changed, and there's no reduction in ability to build any of these things. The stairways that triggered Heidi's initial concern are actually less than half the length of the stairways that were originally approved. So it's a major reduction in impervious area. The retaining walls don't exist. They can be built. There's room to build them. It's a fairly minor amount of landscape changing with a small mini excavator. They were not put in because when Tim was out doing the grading on the site, he realized that he could eliminate that impervious area. He could slope the property, and he felt that was a better solution than a 4 or 5 foot high retaining wall. So he made a field decision, which in retrospect was clearly an error, and neither Heidi nor I caught that. So, you know, that was my error at the time, but in retrospect, I don't look at that as being a detrimental thing. It's I do everything possible when I'm working in a buffer zone to not put in retaining walls, and I think the commission would have to agree with that as a general principle. And the fact that that didn't occur in this case it certainly exists, but I don't look at that as being a terrible negative. The biggest, if I can continue to sort of put this in context, the biggest thing I think that the as-built revealed was that the wetland area that the commission did approve in November 2014 is definitely smaller than what was approved. And Tim's immediate reaction when he saw the as-built was, I've got the space out there to make it bigger, I'll do it. And Jen will agree that we've been struggling with getting the replication area to function successfully as a replicated wetland. And in fact, as recently as 5-6 weeks ago, it was completely rehabbed again, dug deeper, replanted in an attempt to build a more robust wetland regime in there. I still question whether it's working properly, and we're going to hold off until fall to see. But it's going to be very easy to create it. The space is there to do it based on that 2-year-old plan. So the purpose of, and my plan was not to dodge a request by the commission. I thought I was giving you exactly what you needed. I didn't know that Jen felt strongly that wasn't the case. I've been out of state for the last week roughly, so I probably couldn't have responded had she called and said this is not what I wanted. But the intention was to respond quickly and give you what you wanted. You know, clearly they came before you before. They're here again tonight. I'm here tonight as well, and nobody is saying, you know, that there's a willingness to quickly try and address this. So it sounds to me like it's almost administrative and staff technically oriented. I would suggest that we try and have a meeting quickly on the staff level to hammer out exactly what the differences are. And at least I'll come out of that knowing clearly what Jen's looking for, so that I don't come back with something that...
And that's a bare minimum.
We were trying to achieve that by tonight.
I know, but I'd say
we put it in writing. We put it in writing.
That is clearly my error. I do this work all the time, and I thought I had given you what
you know, many of the things you mentioned as being variations, deviances, whatever. We wanted to have those be clear, well documented, and listed for tonight, so that we could quickly move this thing forward, which works at both in both of our best interests. We're not seeing that piece of good faith from the other side.
Well, I apologize. I thought we were providing that to you. So it's clearly miscommunication. It wasn't an attempt to not give you exactly what you wanted, because nobody here is.
Did you get a chance to read the enforcement order?
I'm sorry, sir?
Did you have an opportunity to read the enforcement order?
I did, and I agree, Jen, requested a list. I thought that the plan served to that purpose. We could have very easily given you a written list.
I mean, we're talking a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of, grunt work at the administrative level that has to take place before it gets here. But the reality of all this is, many of these units are constructed, sold and occupied, and there are people living in there. And if the more we allow it to go down that road, the more people who may be buying something they think they're buying, and only to find out that it's work in the back end they may not be interested in.
Heidi didn't sign off on occupancy today. What did you request? She signed off on something that was done, that she knew was done in old.
Yeah.
Building G.
So Heidi did sign.
Because as they continue, then all it means is more people are going to buy in.
We have not signed off on any occupancy for the buildings going in this section.
In this section.
Because he came today, and Heidi signed off on G, which is not part of this, but we have not signed any occupancy going forward on this.
Yeah, this is all common space too, Joe. Nobody is looking at this as being their exclusive backyard or anything like that. These are condos, and it's an active construction site.
We have the issues that twofold. We have the overlay that we don't have. We have a major issue with the wetlands fill between H&I. You say it was approved.
It was approved. Yeah.
I'm not going to say who's right and who's wrong. She's saying it wasn't. So we got to get that straightened out, because that's kind of important. And until we get the overlay and
I think there's disagreement on the size of the replication area, too.
There is. I agree.
They acknowledge that.
There's all kinds of issues.
But this is an ongoing project. We're not here before you looking for a bond release or presenting you a final project as built.
We're unwilling, I think, we're unwilling to lift the cease and desist.
We weren't here asking you to do such a thing.
Well,
We're trying to clarify this is an active, ongoing discussion. I had no idea that.
We look at it as a compliance. We look at it as we've issued an enforcement order. We've asked for specific items, and we want to see compliance with those items.
I agree totally. That's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're looking for.
Right.
So is the next meeting the 24th?
Next
It is,
one
right?
24th.
So we have an existing EO that's out there with a deadline that they failed to meet. We can either extend that EO to a future date to allow what we thought to be done, basically grant some forgiveness, keep the cease and desist in place, or let that EO stand on its own, issue a new EO restating all of it, which I think is just paperwork. So I think we extend
it. My opinion is we extend the one that we have that's issued.
Yeah, to the 24th.
Until the next meeting, and see what they bring in then. That the enforcement order that we did issue at the last meeting granted them the ability to dig one foundation hole and to take the material out of it and truck it off-site. It did not allow them to do any framing or pouring. So I have no problem with that one hole that they wanted to dig. But I'm not in favor of allowing any other activity in that area until our staff is satisfied. And there are issues. There might be big issues, there might be small issues, but we just can't keep operating.
So if our next meeting is the 24th, is that attainable on your schedule, Jen? Should Patrick and his team get Peter and his team, including Patrick, get things to get to you?
2 weeks.
Yeah, Tim.
But the foundations that are currently in, we can start framing on those?
We didn't exclude that on the last EO.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to be clear. Thank you.
No new foundation.
Yeah, I agree.
That was just what was out.
And I'd be real sure that the foundations that are in that you want to frame on, before I put a stick on them, I'd be real sure that they are.
We have foundation aspects. That has not been an issue.
All right, I just want to, I'm trying to save you the trouble because they'll come out.
But if in the framing process resulting in reorientation or changing of stairways or doorways or anything of that sort, you got to be cautious of that, because as you frame them, you might be creating a nonconformance.
The next building that I was planning on framing is Building J, which isn't shown on here, and that's up gradient from
It's
K
back.
and I.
Okay.
It's away from the level.
And the commission has been provided with as-built on all the existing foundations.
Yes.
At your peril.
So do we need a motion to extend the EO, or is
I
it just?
would, yeah. Just
I would offer that we do extend the existing enforcement order till, what's the date of the next meeting?
8/24.
Okay.
Sounds like a great motion, Al. Did you make that? I second it.
All those in favor say
I
aye.
can put my name on that one, sure.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
Yeah, so just get in touch, and Heidi's really the one who knows these plans backwards and forwards, inside and out. That's why you've been talking to her, not me. But we can both be available to meet at your convenience. So.
Okay, I'll call tomorrow morning.
You know, for getting back to, if Heidi and, we charged Heidi and Jen every time they came out, because we instituted a fee. And I don't think she's ever tried to collect.
Oh, the inspection fee? Yeah.
She did. But I mean, this has been a long project.
It's getting longer.
It is getting longer.
It ought not to.
Wrap it up.
But,
Thank you.
thank you.
Other stuff?
Here's the second set.
We still have
Colonial.
What do we have? I'm sorry, what was that?
We tabled it, but if you want to deal with it, I'm prepared to present it. I mean,
It's a small
Heidi-
project. Oh, no, it's an
It's not
RDA.
a small project, it's an RDA, and Heidi thought he would be here to present, but that said, it's not a major issue if you just want to wipe it off the books. It's up to you.
No, we want to make you work, Jennifer.
Yeah. So,
Man, that was me being nice.
the proposal is to expand an existing deck. The lot does have a PCOC from the subdivision. You can see both in the photos and on the plan here
What's the closest?
that the post will remain outside of the 50-foot no-build zone, but the deck will cantilever over. And the new stairs will be farther from the existing wetland than current. There is a little bit of brush dumping in the woods, but only a small amount. It was just some sod, basically. I did confirm the wetland line. I recommend a silt sock when they're doing the work. There's not a huge grade, but they should put something to just kind of establish a limit of work, and pre and post, if you're inclined to approve.
Okay. Any questions, Jack?
They're just replacing a deck, right?
Replacing an existing deck, but it will be larger, and it is more than 300 square feet, so it did not qualify for the small project.
And no hot tubs and no pathways and bridges and...
Not yet.
Like other...
Not that they're showing.
Not, Joe,
Like other
not-
neighbors?
Not right now.
Like other neighbors?
Yeah, not right
It's
now.
after the deck gets built.
That was not colonial, but
The minute
yes,
the paint's
I take
The minute the paint's
preference.
dry, that'll come in for the next.
No questions.
Deb?
No questions.
Al?
No questions, sir.
All set.
Doug? Motion?
Negative number 3, as proposed. I didn't even give it the state exemption, because technically they are building closer than 50 feet. Accessory structures are only exempt if they're
So moved.
50.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.